If you guys enjoy what I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free and easy to do. Before we get started with today's video, I have an announcement to make. After years of telling other people's stories, I finally released one of my own. My novel Eternal Reign is available now in both ebook and paperback format for those of you who are like me and prefer to collect physical media. You can grab a copy right now on Amazon through the link in the description of this video. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. A year after the samurai Samanosuke saw Nobunaga die in battle, he gets a letter from Princess Yuki. Something strange is going on in her castle. Some of the serving staff have gone missing, and she's heard that monsters are eating the people and taking what's left deep under the palace for some unknown reason that can't possibly be good. She told her brother about it, but he's too busy getting ready for battle to do anything about it, so she decided to ask Samanosuke for help. He wouldn't be much of a samurai if he ignored a request for help, so he and Kaede go head out to try and find her before it's too late. When they get to the outskirts of her keep, the two of them split up to see who can find the safest way inside. But in a very unrealistic turn of events, Samanosuke finds the princess in all of 30 seconds being dragged off by two very clearly not human things. He fights them off and saves the princess, which would be the end of the mission, making this the shortest story ever, except for the fact that a really big demon shows up, knocks Samanosuke out, and takes the princess. While he's unconscious, the 12 leaders of the clan of ogres that was wiped out by the demons contact him and give him their power so he can steal the souls of the monsters as a way to avenge the clan of ogres while completing his own mission. The keep is full of monsters, and the soldiers who were supposed to be fighting them are about as useful as you might expect, which means not at all, so Samanosuke is forced to fight his way into the building on his own. When he catches up to the demon that took the princess, the thing refuses to tell him where she is, so Samanosuke kills it and keeps looking, which causes him to run into a very creepy creature that's in the middle of sifting through the organs in a dead guy's body in a very unsanitary way. He's not even slightly interested in Samanosuke, but he does just casually let him know that he had resurrected Nobunaga after he took an arrow to the throat. And because of that, the samurai agreed to serve the demons. That's not good news, but the demon doctor sends another one of his weird creations at Samanosuke before he leaves, so he doesn't really have time to worry about Nobunaga. After cutting down the very abnormal creature, he runs into a young boy who's getting attacked by an old guy who doesn't look like the type of guy you would want to leave around children. The boy manages to slip away, and the creepy guy tries to follow him, but Samanosuke stops him. The old guy's named Takichiro, and he's a servant of Nobunaga, one who recognizes Samanosuke. He tries to get him to join his clan, an offer that he obviously refuses, but instead of killing the old man like he should have, he lets him leave. Kaede managed to get into the keep too, and she caught the boy whose name is Yumimaru. Samanosuke wants to know what Nobunaga's servant wanted with him, but he runs off without answering, so he sends Kaede after him while he keeps looking for the princess. The kid is more willing to talk to her, so she manages to learn his whole story. 4 years ago, his parents got killed, so Yuki brought him into the castle and treated him like a little brother, so he snuck into the keep to save her. That doesn't explain why the old samurai was after him, but figuring that out will have to wait, because some traps activated forced the two of them to figure out how to not die. The keep was clearly built by the same company that made every building in Resident Evil, because the traps were absolutely ridiculous, but once they make it through, the pair split up and get back to their hunt. Yumimaru gets captured again because of course he does, and this time Takichiro's minion gets away with the boy before Samanosuke can stop him. He does try to actually kill the old samurai this time, but Takichiro tells him that sacrificing Yuki in a very unpleasant way is gonna happen soon, and that will give Nobunaga the power he needs to wipe out her clan for good. Then he jumps out of a window that really should have killed him, which proves that he's not exactly normal either. The guy who captured Yumimaru didn't get far, so Samanosuke catches up to him and puts him down, rescuing the boy again. The kid wasn't the only person still alive in the castle. One of the serving women stumbles into the room, and as luck would have it, she saw Princess Yuki get dragged to the underground area of the keep. She passes out before she can say more, so Samanosuke leaves her and Yumimaru with Kaede and heads to the keep's underground area to try and find the princess. That place is even more infested with demons than the rest of the palace, which isn't hard to understand after Samanosuke finds a door to the demon realm down there. Before he can go through it to see if that's where they've taken the princess, Takichiro uses some magic to paralyze him. Somehow the insane scientist demon had enough time to create a clone of Samanosuke because apparently that type of thing is easy to do, and he sends it to attack Kaede. The serving woman was working with the enemy too because she uses that opportunity to snatch Yumimaru. They only knock Kaede out because no one ever finishes off the heroes when they have the chance, so when she wakes up, she chases after the boy. She doesn't find him, but she does find Yuki locked in a prison cell. She tries to break her out, but the demon scientist takes her away and leaves one of his experiments behind to deal with her. She puts it down and runs off to find Samanosuke.
He comes face to face with his own clone, but since fighting himself is just another in the long line of weird stuff he's dealt with on this mission, he finishes himself off and keeps going. He finds the woman who took Yumimaru and she reveals that she's a demon, opens the gate to the demon realm and takes the boy through it, locking the way behind her. Kaede catches up with him and tries to break through the barrier, but when that doesn't work, the two of them split up to try to find another way inside. There's a magic bow in the keep that can break through the barrier, but when Samanosuke finds it, the demon who opened the gate attacks it. Because villains love to monologue, she tells him that their dark ceremony has already started, and they're going to execute Yumimaru in front of the princess. Negative emotions will make the blood give Nobunaga even more power once he drinks it. There's very little time left if Samanosuke wants to stop that from happening. Fortunately, Kaede kills the demon by blowing up that part of the keep, which is a bit overkill, especially since she nearly kills the two of them too. She gets hurt by the blast, so Samanosuke puts her in the safest place he can find, before breaking the seal on the demon realm and heading inside to try and stop the ritual. He gets stopped by the demon's strongest creation, but he puts that down too, making a clear path to where Yuki and Yumimaru are being held. Fortinbras, the king of the demons, is guarding it, so Samanosuke is forced to fight him to save them. He beats the demon and frees them, but before he can escape, the demon king wakes back up and grabs him. Kaede takes the others to safety, but Samanosuke is trapped and nearly crushed to death. His blood unlocks the full power of the gauntlet, something that should have happened way earlier considering how much damage he's taken throughout this story. But it gives him the power to put the Demon King down for good, leaving him alone to face Nobunaga in the collapsing keep. Despite the fact that Samanosuke succeeded in messing up the demon's plans with the princess, her clan is eventually wiped out by the Oda clan. Yuki and Yumimaru escape that fate and go off to see the world, while Kaede spent her time searching for Samanosuke. But as for now, she still has no idea whether or not he made it out alive. This concludes the story of Onimusha Warlords. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, comment, share it, and subscribe. Grab a copy of my novel on your way out, and I'll see you all next time.
The elves of Thedas aren't exactly treated well. They used to be slaves to the humans, but even though they've been freed, the whole equality thing is lacking. The ones who choose to live in cities are put into segregated sections called alienages, and they do what they can to get by. Even though their situation is far from pleasant, the elves in the city of Denerim have built a very close community that they're proud of. You've lived in that community your entire life, and today just so happens to be a very important day for you. You're getting married, and even though you're not all that excited about it, your cousin Shiani wasn't gonna let you sleep through the day, especially since you and your other cousin Soris are both getting married, and your brides have shown up early. Shiani runs off to get things set up while your father lets you know that even though you're supposed to share everything with your spouse, it may not be a good idea to tell her all about how your mother taught you various ways to murder people with pointy objects before she got killed. It wouldn't do to make yourself look like a violent individual, so you agree to keep that little detail a secret before you head off to meet up with Soris. He's not exactly happy about doing the whole wedding thing either, but there's really no way to avoid it, so the two of you head off to meet your brides. Before you get the chance, a group of humans show up, and they're not exactly there to be friendly, so Shiani does the only sensible thing and bashes one of them in the head with a vase. Unfortunately, the man she hit is Von Urien, the son of the man who runs the entire city, so even though his friends have to carry him out of the alienage, it's pretty obvious that he's gonna be back to cause problems later. Once you and Soris meet your brides and they head off to get ready, the two of you see another human, and this one is carrying weapons and looks like he knows how to use them. Not really wanting to deal with any more trouble, the two of you go to send him away, but this human is actually friends with Valendrian, the leader of the alienage. The man's name is Duncan, and he's the leader of the Grey Wardens. The Wardens are a group that specializes in fighting the Darkspawn whenever they attack the surface world. Those attacks are called a blight, and one of them is happening now, so King Kalen has called the Wardens to Ostagar to help fight the Horde with his army. And Duncan's out recruiting new wardens to join the fight. Valendrian is fine with helping him with his recruiting after the wedding. Unfortunately, while the ceremony is going on, the man Shiani knocked out comes back with a lot of soldiers. He kidnaps a lot of the women, including Shiani, for some very unpleasant reasons, knocks you unconscious for talking to him, and leaves. When you wake up, Soris lets you know that Vaughn took all of the women who were in the wedding party to his palace, and all of the elves are obviously upset. They want to go after the women, but if an army of elves storm the palace, everyone from the alienage will end up dead. Under normal circumstances, Valendrian would tell everyone to just wait it out, but he's heard stories about what Vaughn and his friends do to the women they bring to the palace. They don't tend to live through the experience. Normally he only takes 1 or 2 women, but since his dad's out of the city, he's gotten a lot bolder. You and Soris aren't willing to let your brides-to-be and your cousin suffer that fate, and one of the elves that works as a servant in the palace thinks that he can give you a chance to stage a rescue. He's pretty sure that he can sneak the two of you into the palace since no one will notice a few extra elves running around. But if you're seen in an area that you're not supposed to be in, being unarmed won't end well for you. So before you head into the palace, Duncan lets you use some of his weapons, so the two of you head off to save your friends. It takes about 2 seconds for your silent infiltration to turn into an all-out assault. But fortunately, the training that you were supposed to keep a secret pays off, making you and Soros more than a match for anyone who tries to bar your way. Unfortunately, you weren't fast enough to save everyone. Some of the women are already dead by the time you reach Vaughn's room. When the man sees that you're covered in a lot of blood that doesn't belong to you, he tries to make a deal with you. But even the fact that his father might retaliate against all of your people once he gets back isn't enough to stop you from killing him for what he's done. Shiani's glad that you killed him, but that won't erase what's already happened to her. Most of the others hadn't been hurt yet, so with the survivors in tow, you head back to the alienage. There's no way you could have possibly thought your little escapade would go unnoticed. Before you even have the chance to plan your escape, the city guard shows up to arrest the culprits. Since someone is going to go down for what happened, you keep Soros' involvement a secret and take the blame for the attack. The guards barely believe that one elf could have done so much damage, but they accept your confession and get ready to take you in. Instead of letting you rot in a prison cell until the day of your execution, Duncan uses the Grey Warden's right of conscription to force the guards to hand you over to him. They don't like it, but they can't override his authority, so they let him take you under one condition. He gets you out of the city immediately. So after you say your goodbyes to your friends and family, Duncan takes you to Ostagar so you can join the Grey Wardens in their war with the Darkspawn. The Mages Guild of Tamriel is always recruiting new members, probably because so many of them die or disappear when spells go wrong. But since no one will turn down the chance to learn how to set people on fire with their fingertips, you join up. And it doesn't take long for Velast, a senior member of the guild, to call on you for help with an assignment. She's the keeper of all things lore for the guild, which officially makes her my favorite person. And since books are extremely important to mages, her position is second only to the guildmaster Vanis. So a request from her isn't exactly something that you can ignore, so you head to the guild hall in Daggerfall to see what she's got in store for you. Velast has heard that there are some ancient books in some even older ruins called Xylem, and she wants you to go there and collect them for her. It doesn't sound like the most difficult of jobs, but considering the fact that ancient ruins could be filled with everything from smugglers and pirates to zombies and demons, there's no telling what will try to eat you while you're there. There are 4 clearly magical books there, but when you grab one of them, one that doesn't have any words written in it, the ghost of a mage named Shalador appears and tells you to let Velast know that fire will show you what's written on the pages. He also thinks she'll know what to do once she hears that. So with your prizes in hand, you head back to the guild. Velast is very surprised to hear that Shalador showed up. The man is a legend among mages, and he wasn't wrong about her understanding his message about how to reveal the words in the book. In the first era, the mages would use an ink that would only appear when they covered their writing in a magical fire. That's a good way to keep people from learning your secrets, but the guild hall has a brazier that burns with the exact type of fire that you need, so Velast has you throw the book inside of it. She probably made you do it just in case it blew up, but it doesn't. The words do appear, but you can't read them. Velast can read some of it, and she sees a spell that would let you summon the ghost of Shalador. Since he was pretty much the most powerful mage in his day, he'll likely be able to help you decipher the book. Granted, summoning him will link his mind to yours, which will let him talk to you whenever he wants. I have enough voices in my head, so I wouldn't be all that excited about adding another one, but apparently members of the Mages Guild are okay with that because you immediately agree to perform the summoning ritual. It works, and Shalador does link with you. He thinks that you're the perfect person to help him with this final mission, but it's going to be extremely difficult. The world is at war, but Shalador is planning on making a safe haven where mages can study their art without getting pulled into the world's nonsense. He actually made the place hundreds of years ago, but it got stolen and taken to a place called the Shivering Isles, which is not a place that anyone should ever visit. The only way to get Shalador's island back is to find 4 books, which is what he needs you for. Those books are in a place called Cheesemonger's Hollow, which is in the top 5 on the list of stupidest names for places, but it's one of the homes of the insane god Sheogorath. The guy is the god of madness, and he is extremely unpredictable, so there's no telling what he'll do. But because self-preservation isn't high on your priority list, and Shalador is already dead, you agree to go with him, and he opens a portal to the Hollow. The first thing you run into in the weirdly named place is Sheogorath's manservant. He seems relatively normal to say he works for a crazy guy, and when you tell him that you're there for Shalador's books, he agrees to let you go inside after a little test. Well, it's not all that little. He opens a portal that lets Daedra out that try to kill you, and they won't stop coming until you close the portal. Once you've sealed it, he lets you head into the hollow to get the books. Apparently it's all happening under Sheogorath's orders because he knows that you're there. He sends his personal monster to fight you right before you grab the books, for his personal entertainment of course. When you kill it, he lets you take one of the books, but he makes the other 3 vanish and shows up to talk to you in person, which will probably be anything but good. The Daedric Prince remembers Shalador, and he knows exactly what the man is trying to get back. Since he has something that you want, he figures that it'll be fun to turn your book collecting into a little contest. He'll give you a few random tasks that will likely kill you, and if you live, you get a book. Since you don't exactly have a choice but to play along if you want the things, you agree. Sheogorath doesn't think the game will be as fun without Shalador, so proving that he really does have godlike powers, he makes Shalador appear so he can talk to him. He lets the dead mage know that the 2 of you have made a deal, which Shalador is suspicious of since Sheogorath's deals always have some type of hook in them. And he wasn't wrong. The god put a curse on the books, making it impossible for Shalador to ever read them. After delivering that not too happy bit of information and shrugging off an attack from the very unhappy mage, Sheogorath disappears, leaving you and the ghost alone to figure out how you're going to get the other books. Velas will be able to translate the book that you have, but it'll take longer than it would have for Shalador, and since there's not much else you can do at the moment, the mage teleports you back to her so you can let her know what happened and she can get to work. When you tell her everything that's happened, she's not exactly thrilled to know that she won't have Shalador's help with the book. But she gets to work and she promises to send someone to find you once she's finished. When Velas has figured out what the book says, Shalador tracks you down so you can get ready to deal with your first trial. Since books are Velas' life, she's been enjoying working on the little project, but the whole process has made her tired. The book seems to be nothing more than a collection of children's stories, but each story holds secrets about ancient magic and history, which shows that while Sheogorath is clearly nuts, he's also a genius for being able to create something so sophisticated. Which means there's probably more to the trials than what you see on the surface. Shalador's been having trouble opening a portal back to Sheogorath's realm, but he's come up with a solution to that problem, so he manages to tear open a hole to the Shivering Isles, and you step through to where Haskell is waiting for you again. His master wants you to find some items for him before he'll give you the second book. One's a staff and the other's a fork because you're not dealing with the most normal of people. The fork is magical for someone like a god, but for you it'll just be a regular eating utensil. One that Haskell opened a portal directly to for your convenience. Granted, the portal might not go directly to the thing since it got lost in Skyrim during the previous era a very long time ago. The thing was in the tomb of a dragon priest, so naturally you showing up and trying to take something causes all of the corpses to get up and try to kill you. After fighting through no small number of undead, you find the fork and Haskell sends you to Hammerfell where he thinks the staff is in the hands of a long dead prince. The man had been a great warrior 1,000 years ago, which means he'll be a dangerous zombie too. His followers had used magical seals to guard his resting place, but between you and Shalador, getting past them and his guards isn't all that rough. Once you've re-killed the man and his guardians, you take Sheogorath's staff and Haskell brings you back to the Isle so you can talk to his master. After he makes you use the staff, which is weirdly named the Wabajack, to turn a few people into very random things, the god honors his word and gives you the book, which instantly takes you back to the Mages Guild. The second book is called The Circus of Cheerful Slaughter, which Velas thinks is an interesting title, but that's probably because she won't have to do whatever weirdness the book tells you to. Either way, she gets to work on translating it. Figuring out what the book says isn't all that hard for her, but figuring out what the book wants you to do is a little bit rougher this time. Mainly because it doesn't make sense. She figures that since you're the one who dealt with the insane god, the translated version might make sense when you read it. It doesn't, but that doesn't matter because as soon as you touch it, it takes you to a creepy forest where Sheogorath is waiting for you. For this trial, he wants you to perform a play that he wrote about the 3 alliances being at war while the Mages Guild tries not to get drawn into it, and you keep them out of it by murdering the different alliance leaders. For the most part, it doesn't make any sense. Pretty much like everything else the crazy god does. But in the midst of it all, he shows you a bit about Velas' history and how she was so talented that Vanus was all too eager to accept her into the guild. He also shows signs that he's been watching her struggle to decipher his books, which proves that he is very interested in her, which is definitely not a good thing. You also get to see how Sheogorath tricked Shalador into trading the island sanctuary he made for a book called the Folium Discognitum, which was not a good trade, and he vowed to get back his island. He got so focused on that mission that he ended up driving his own wife away. After you finish the play, which ends with you fighting to save your mage friends, the crazy god gives you book number 3, which drags you back to the Mages Guild. Velas saw you disappear, and since you came back with another book, she figures you must have completed another trial, one that she doesn't want to know anything about, but she is eager to get started on translating this new book. She's gotten faster with the translation, so it doesn't take long for her to figure out what the next trial is, but Shalador thinks her constantly working with the books is doing something to her. There's nothing any of you can do about it, but the mage wants you to keep an eye on her just in case. Your next trial is in a place called the Chateau of the Ravenous Rodent, which is in the part of the Shivering Isles called Dementia, which does not sound even remotely inviting. But Velas opens up a portal to take you to the place, and you step through to start the final trial. Shalador goes with you for the last trial, but Sheogorath doesn't want him there, so he boots him from the realm before telling you about your last test. The place he's brought you to is his family estate that he's been passing down to himself from generation to generation. He brings guests there from time to time, and the first thing he wants you to do is evict the one that doesn't belong there while avoiding getting eaten since the other guests are literal cannibals. Once that's done, he sends you through a maze full of monsters that's also very dark, because monsters are even more scary when you can't see them. After that, he sends you into the mansion, which is full of crazy people who try to kill you. He wants you to kill his uncle Leo, who had a weird rat fetish. Since it's better to not ask questions that you don't want to know the answers to, you kill the guy and Sheogorath gives you the last book, one that he thinks Velas will really benefit from reading. It doesn't take long for her to translate it, which has Shalador super excited since that means he can finally get his island back. But reading the book seems to have changed Velas. She randomly says nonsense statements very much like Sheogorath, but she claims to be fine, and she'll be even better once she finally gets to see this island. So using the 4 books together, Shalador is able to pull his island back to Tamriel. The place is supposed to be a lush sanctuary filled with beautiful structures and landscapes, like a resort for mages to go and get away from the troubles of the world. But as soon as he summons it, Shalador knows that something is wrong. You and Velas follow him through the portal to Ivea and find that Sheogorath had filled the island with Daedra. The only way the place will ever be usable is if you clear out the creatures, so the 3 of you head to the Grand Hall at the center of the island so you can see just how bad the situation is. As a surprise to no one, you find Sheogorath waiting for you there. Shalador actually tries to attack the god to get him to leave the island, but that obviously does nothing because he's a god. He didn't break his word. He said that if you completed his trials, you could have the island. He just didn't tell you that he had filled it with creatures. He recommends that you get written contracts in the future if you plan on making deals with people. That way you can iron out all of the details. It shouldn't be a big deal. He figures you and Velas can close the portals and stop the Daedra without too much trouble. He figures she would have seen this coming since he specifically cursed his books because he knew that the only person who could read them was her. He clearly wants her for something, but you won't find out what until you deal with the creatures, so you get to work on shutting down the portals. The god barricades himself inside of the Grand Hall, so while you and Velas work, Shalador puts his efforts into breaking through the god's barrier. As the 2 of you close the portals, Velas steadily goes more and more insane, and by the time you get into the building, she's gone completely nuts, thinking butterflies are dancing in her head, so you have to face the god alone. He has you fight Haskell, who among all of his other duties is apparently a bodyguard too. After you beat the man, Sheogorath agrees to leave the island, but he plans on taking Velas with him to the Shivering Isles. It's a place for crazy people, and the spells he put on the books were specifically made to break the woman's mind and make her a perfect new permanent resident of his domain. But he decides to give you the choice on whether she comes with him or not. He offers you the same book of power that Shalador had traded his island for. If you decide to give up the power that the book offers, he'll fix Velas' mind and leave. Only a fool would trust any artifact that someone like Sheogorath offers, so you do the smart thing and choose to save Velas. True to his word, the god fixes her mind and leaves, giving the mages a place where they can truly be neutral and train in their arts without ever having to worry about being drawn into the wars of the world. Maybe. This concludes the story of the Mages Guild. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Donate to the channel if you can, and I'll see you all next time. While Peter's swinging through the city, he gets a call from Chief Clark, whose team is about to demolish a hospital that Sandman ruined during his not-so-little rampage. But the building's unstable, so he wants Peter to use his webs to help keep everything from collapsing early. Peter's got a bit of time, so he heads over there to help. By the time he gets there, they've already set the explosives in most of the sectors, but the last one collapses with the crew inside, so Peter gets to whip out some of his tech to perform a rescue operation, namely his remote-controlled spider robot that's small enough to slip through the vents and track down the firefighters who got trapped. That way their crew members can know exactly where they are. The robot is strong enough to move some debris and it can hover a bit, so Peter's able to track down the people without too much trouble. But it turns out there was another guy trapped in the building that wasn't a part of the fire team, so Peter goes deeper into the horribly torn up building to look for him. It turns out that there are actually a lot of people in the building, and they've been digging through the building's resources looking for stuff, which is what made it start collapsing faster. Peter overhears them talking, and apparently they are part of a cult called the Followers of the Flame who like to blow things up. Since this building's already gonna explode soon, they don't have to do too much work, but they plan on finding the guy who tried to leave their group before the demolition happens. They catch the guy and they're about to kill him because the only way that anyone quits their cult is by dying painfully. The guy is just lucky that Spider-Man came busting into the room and saves him by doing what he usually does and giving severe injuries to everyone in the room. The cultists claim they have a prophecy that said they would have to face him eventually, and they even have a name for him, the Fool's Beacon. He likes the fact that he's in a prophecy, but he's not too big of a fan of the name or the fact that his part is to apparently burn to death with everyone else, so he proceeds to punch them all until they stop moving. One of them is about to get away, but he's knocked out by a woman in purple, who shows up and reveals a strange mark on one of the cultist's arms that appears after she lights a fire painfully close to it. It turns out that the woman is Yuri, the former cop who worked with Peter during the Devil's Breath incident, before she got disillusioned with the justice system and started putting down criminals in a more permanent sense. Now the criminal she hunts calls her Wraith. Peter wants to know where she's been, but all of the fighting's made the building start to collapse. Wraith is perfectly fine with leaving all of the unconscious cultists to die, but Peter manages to get them all out before they're crushed to death. Later, Yuri gives him a call to let him know that she's tracked the Followers of the Flame to an abandoned clinic in Chinatown, and he can come over to help her deal with them if he wants. Since she makes it pretty clear that she plans on killing the people, Peter decides to tag along to keep her in line. Yuri's been tracking this cult for weeks, which wasn't hard once she got on their trail since they leave a lot of dead bodies behind. They're focused on something called the Crimson Hour, but she has no idea what that means. She figures that whatever it is won't matter if she can get her hands on their leader. From the look of things, the cultists haven't been in the city for long, but they've had enough time to get some doors that won't open unless people have the right combination of symbols on their arms. Since Peter and Yuri have knocked out quite a few of these fanatics on their infiltration mission, they don't have a hard time getting into the main base where they see some of the cult members locking up some people who tried to run away. Apparently, a lot of people didn't realize that joining a cult was bad until after they were members, because clearly people who spend all of their time setting things on fire are perfectly normal friends to have. Fortunately for them, Peter and Yuri let them out of their cells, but hitting the button opens up a Skype call with the leader of the cult, a man who calls himself the Flame and who looks a whole lot like Jake Paul for some reason, and he apparently knows Yuri personally. Leading this cult is apparently not his first rodeo, but Yuri plans on making it his last if he tells her where he is. In what has to be the most obvious lead into a trap ever, he tells her that he's holed up in an old hospital in North Astoria, and if they live through the onslaught of men he sends into the room to kill them, he'll be waiting there for them. Beating the cult members is light work, so much so that Yuri has time to tell Peter how she met the Flame while they're crippling crazy people. She had hunted him down when she was a cop, but he'd gotten away, and when she'd gotten close to him and his last group, he had killed each and every one of his followers so they wouldn't be able to talk to the cops. After that, he had disappeared until he showed back up with this new group, but they're different from the last crew. They're wild and loud, like they don't care if people come after them, which makes them even more dangerous. That's why once all of the prisoners are free, Yuri wants to head straight to the hospital. It's so obviously a trap that Peter manages to convince her that she should at least scout the area around the place first, and they should go in together. She scouts it out, but she doesn't wait for him, so by the time Peter gets there, she's already taken out the first set of guards and went inside. Granted, she didn't kill them, but Peter knows that if she gets her hands on the Flame, he won't be so lucky, so he books it inside. He finds her right as she's in the middle of brutally questioning the Flame, who was actually right where he said he'd be. When she sees Peter, she stabs the Flame in the side, which causes Peter to attack her. Now, I'm no medical expert, but I'm pretty sure that getting a foot-long curved blade rammed into your side will do way too much damage for you to stop yourself from bleeding out by just putting some pressure on it. But Peter keeps the Flame alive by webbing his wound closed and tries to get him out of the building before Yuri can finish him off. That gives the man the opportunity to use his detonator and blow up the room they had been in. That also lets Yuri catch up to them, so Peter webs the Flame up and fights Yuri to keep her from murdering the violent psychopath who has murdered hundreds of people, and he will definitely murder more. Yuri accuses Peter of being someone who cares more about being good than actually doing good, because if he really wanted to help people, he'd put an end to violent criminals permanently. She is perfectly fine with losing sleep over the villain that she kills versus thinking about all of the people that she let die by not doing what was right. Unfortunately, neither one of them will get to deal with the flame because by the time they finish fighting and make it outside, he's gotten out of Peter's webs and escaped, which means they both have to start the hunt for him over. And this time Yuri's gonna do it on her own, meaning it's a race. If she finds the guy first, she's definitely gonna kill him, so Peter's determined to not let that happen. Since Genki monitors everything, he knows that Peter's been fighting the followers of the flame. So when he sees reports saying that some of them have been seen on the roof of a building in Brooklyn, he sends Peter the location. Peter doesn't find them there, but he does see some of their stuff, including a map that shows that they've been watching a local scrapyard. They also seem to have some interest in Oscorp, which likely won't lead to anything good either, so Peter swings off to the scrapyard. The cultists are there setting up a whole lot of bombs and gas canisters, which, considering the fact that all of the buildings around the place are full of people, the death toll will be super high if the scrapyard explodes, so Peter does what he does best and neutralizes the cultists while disarming the bombs. He gets rid of 4 of them before the other cultists notice that they're going offline, and they come out of the building to investigate. Yuri shows up too and joins Peter in taking down the cultists while the flame watches the fight from somewhere and taunts the 2 of them over the loudspeaker. Yuri had been trying to find out where the man was broadcasting from, but she couldn't find him, which is weird because since this is the beginning of his so-called Crimson Hour, she would have expected him to be there. He clearly has another trick up his sleeve, and the 2 of them figure out what it is just a little too late. The bombs weren't the thing that was going to cause the big explosion. A train from Oscorp was scheduled to ride into the scrapyard, so the cultists cut its brakes. With all of the fuel strategically placed around the scrapyard, the train crashing at full speed would blow up the entire area. It's moving too fast for Peter to stop it with his webs, so he and Yuri improvise and use the cultist bombs to derail it. It still would have hit the explosives, but Peter uses some muscle power to slow it down, but it stops on top of him, pinning him to the ground. That's when the flame shows up and reveals his true plan. He'd heard about what Oscorp had been working on with their treatment for Harry Osborn. At first he thought it was just another suit that would give somebody super strength, which didn't make it all that special. But when the monsters started appearing around the city and Oscorp sent some of their special medicine out for safekeeping, the flame decided to get it for himself. See, the train that Peter just stopped was carrying that extra treatment. A red symbiote that the flame thought would be a perfect tool to help bring in the true Crimson Hour, and the time when he can unleash carnage on the unworthy. He then proceeds to set Peter on fire and hop in a helicopter and leave. Lucky for him, instead of chasing after the flame, Yuri saves Peter's life before heading off to track the man down again. A man whose name is Cletus Cassidy, better known by all Spider-Man fans as Carnage, which means we're in for some very bloody mayhem in the future. There's been a series of RPGs released throughout the years involving Valkyries, Odin's female servants whose sole mission is to collect the souls of the fallen warriors so they will be ready to fight in Ragnarok. The newest installment in this series of games, even though it's not a direct sequel to any particular one, is Valkyrie Elysium, and because I played the game and enjoyed it, we're going to cover the story. Now there are 4 endings, the bad one, the worst one, the okay one, and the true one. Because this is the complete story, we're going to cover the true ending in this video. I'll put out another video showing the other 3 endings and how to unlock them at another time, but for now, let's get into the story of Valkyrie Elysium. Long before the first humans came to be, Odin and his brothers combined their powers to kill the giant Ymir and created the world. With the world tree sitting above it all, the humans and gods existed in 3 realms, Midgard, Asgard, and Niflheim. Things were peaceful, but obviously that couldn't last forever. Fenrir attacked Asgard for reasons that no one knows, but Odin and his followers fought the she-wolf and her followers in a battle that covered all of the worlds in war. Millions of people died, and all of the worlds were pushed to the brink of destruction in a war that didn't seem like it would ever end. But during one of their battles, Fenrir ripped out Odin's windpipe, and he impaled her in the head with a spear. Now if they weren't gods, they both would have died, but even though they lived, neither could fight anymore, so the war came to an end. But just because their fight was over, that didn't mean peace was coming. The end of their battle signaled something that Odin knew from a prophecy. Ragnarok had begun. That meant that the world was about to return to the nothingness that had spawned it, and everyone and everything was going to die. Odin, not wanting to sit back and let the end come, decided to make a new class of god to try to change his fate and save the world. Those gods were the Valkyrie, and now his newest one has just woken up and needs to be trained so she can prepare for her mission. Before he wakes her up, Odin has his new Valkyrie go through a few tests in a world that Odin made inside of her mind, where she fights against a few undead and learns about her power to use the souls of the dead to suit her needs. After she proves herself against a giant berserker, Odin wakes her up. She doesn't have a name, and Odin doesn't waste time giving her one. All that she needs to know is that Ragnarok is tearing the world apart. Everything is ending, and Odin is currently too weak to do anything about it after what Fenrir had done to him. So he needs the Valkyrie to do what he can't and head to Midgard and purify the lost souls that are there. With so many dying in the war, their souls hadn't been able to move on, which caused them to become undead monsters. The stronger souls became even stronger monsters, and purifying them will help counter the effects of Ragnarok. It's a simple enough mission, so Valkyrie heads to Midgard to get started. She goes to an area where she senses a very strong soul, and while most of the people in the area are either undead or just regular dead, she does see a living human who runs off when she tries to talk to him. She would have chased after him, but she doesn't really care about what he's doing since she has her own mission to deal with, so she lets him go and keeps moving forward toward the powerful soul. When she finally tracks it down, it's a giant monstrosity that is much more powerful than she expected, but she beats it, causing it to turn back into the soul of a large armored man named Egon. Even though he had just been the giant creature that had tried very hard to murder the Valkyrie, he has no idea how he became a monster. He doesn't even remember the fight. But whoever he was, his soul had drawn in the souls of a lot of undead, and that had turned him into the very odd creature. The talk of souls confuses Egon a bit since he has no idea who the woman is, and he doesn't even fully realize that he's actually dead. But he has heard of Valkyries before, and how they guide the souls of chosen warriors to Asgard. That helps him finally understand that he's no longer a part of the living. He apologizes for causing her trouble and leaves while the Valkyrie heads back to Asgard to tell Odin what had happened. Odin can tell that she's been doing her job because he's linked to the world, and with every soul she purifies, he gets stronger. When she tells him about Egon, he lets her know that that man was a particularly strong soul called an Einherjar, and it was a good thing that she found one so fast. They are souls that had more power than their mortal bodies could contain, so they are capable of joining the gods and fighting even after death. Those souls are very useful, so he sends the Valkyrie back down to Midgard to hunt the man down. Egon's wandered off from where she had left him, but she can hear fragments of his soul nearby. She hunts them down, dealing with any undead she encounters on the way, and she eventually finds him, but he doesn't feel like he deserves to be one of her chosen warriors, mainly because he had failed at his knightly duties in life. But the Valkyrie believes that him joining her on her mission to save the world would be a good way to make up for whatever mistakes he feels like he's made in life. She has a good point, so Egon agrees and becomes her first Einherjar. Her mission was a success, but before she can head back to Asgard, a Valkyrie dressed in dark armor shows up. She can tell that this Valkyrie must be new because she has no clue what's going on, so she decides to see just how good Odin's new toy can fight. And after she's satisfied, she introduces herself as Hilde. Even though she refuses to answer any of the Valkyrie's questions, she is pretty sure that they'll meet up again. She teleports away, leaving Valkyrie and Egon with more questions than answers, but Valkyrie isn't all that concerned about the details. If Hilde turns out to be an enemy of Odin's, whether she's a Valkyrie or not, she'll kill her. Egon doesn't seem to think that it'll be that simple, but he doesn't argue as the two of them make their way back to Asgard. When Valkyrie lets Odin know about Hilde's attack, he doesn't seem all that surprised, but he had thought that all of the other Valkyries had died during the war. He isn't all that sure who Hilde is, but he's positive that she's an enemy. The Valkyrie, being new to all of this, doesn't question him, and she heads back to Midgard to a place called Galba, in search of yet another soul. In Egon's time, the place had been a prosperous trading hub with a strong military, but now it's practically a ruin, which means he has no idea just how long he's been dead. He wants to explore a bit just to see how much the place has changed, but Valkyrie has no plans on deviating from her mission for even a minute. From what she was told, the slower she goes, the faster the world dies, so they head into the city where they come across a tree that's actually made from a whole lot of souls merging together. She releases them so they can move on with a lot less effort than it takes to free the ones that are trying to kill her. There are more souls around that have turned into trees, plants, flowers, and the like, and with each one that she purifies, she can hear their final thoughts and memories, all except for one strange green flower that she can't make out for some reason. It's almost like it's corrupted or being blocked from her, but either way there's nothing she can do about it for now, so she just keeps looking around for more of the giant soul trees. They turn out to be harder to find than she expected, because of course finding a handful of very specific trees in a giant city couldn't possibly be difficult. Egon suggests that she could just fly over the city and take a look around from there because that is a thing that Valkyrie can do, but she would rather search on the ground so she could deal with the undead as they look. Their conversation gets cut short because she senses someone watching them, someone that's not undead. It turns out to be the same man that Valkyrie had seen in the other city, and this time he actually talks instead of running away. Valkyrie is lacking in people skills, so Egon takes the lead. He says that Valkyrie's name is Maria because just calling the woman Valkyrie isn't a good way to make conversation easy. Not to mention, if the man gets wind of the fact that he's talking to a god and a ghost, he might just run away. His name is Armand and he's looking for something. Even with the world the way it is, he hopes that he'll find it. He doesn't go into details about what he's hunting for, but he did overhear that the pair were looking for weird trees. He just so happened to pass by quite a few of them on his way there, and he's more than willing to show the pair where they are. Egon's fine with trusting the man, but Valkyrie's a little skeptical. She thinks it could be a trap, and she says it out loud, which Egon points out is not exactly polite. Even if it is a trap, she's a god and Egon's like a 7-foot tall dead guy, so I think they'd be okay. True to his word, Armand leads the pair to one of the trees, but before the Valkyrie can deal with it, another giant monster attacks. Armand stays back so he won't die while Valkyrie and Egon deal with it. When it's beaten, it turns into the soul of a young man named Cypher, and like Egon, he's strong enough to become an Einherjar. But he doesn't want to because the job doesn't sound all that appealing to him. Valkyrie can't understand why someone would refuse the greatest honor a human could ever get, but Egon understands since he had refused at first too. Valkyrie thinks that he may be mentally deficient too, but she's not interested in the oddities of humans when she has work left to do, like purifying the trees made of souls. She does it right in front of Armand, which makes him a bit curious, but she lets him know that it's none of her business even though she does appreciate his help. She's not the nicest person, and since Armand did just watch her kill a Hydra, he says his goodbyes before the woman decides that he's annoying enough to kill. Egon thinks the guy's a little strange for even wandering around in such a hostile environment, but there's really no limit to what people will put themselves through if they think it's important enough. Valkyrie, not really having any desires of her own outside of her mission, can't really understand that. But while she's thinking about it, she has a blurry vision of a field of flowers and some people that she can't make out. When Egon asks her why she was just staring off into space for like 10 minutes, she shrugs it off and decides to track down Cypher's soul, because there's no way he really didn't want to become one of her servants. Egon figured she would be more interested in seeing if there were any other humans like Armand around, but she can't understand what purpose that would serve since living people aren't all that useful to her mission. She is the definition of somebody with a one-track mind. Her focus does let her track down Cypher, but his answer is still no. He wasn't exactly a fighter, so he doesn't see how he has what it takes to be one of her chosen warriors. But after Egon talks to him and explains that joining the Valkyrie may give him a chance to deal with any unfinished business that he has, he agrees. Back in Asgard, Odin is impressed by his Valkyrie's progress, and because of how well she's done, it's time for the next mission. He still needs her to purify souls like before, but he wants her to find 4 powerful items called the 4 gifts. Gungnir, the divine spear, Leviathan, the demon sword, Draupnir, the golden band, and the horn Gjallarhorn. They were all stored in Asgard, but they got lost in Midgard during the war. Time is getting short, so he needs her to find them fast. With them being so powerful, she shouldn't have a hard time sensing them, so it's back to Midgard she goes with her 2 Einherjar. She doesn't know what the items look like, but if they're as powerful as Odin claims they are, they'll probably do some weird things to the place that they're in, so that should make finding them pretty easy. That doesn't mean those places will be safe, but they shouldn't be hard to find. And if they aren't hard to find for Valkyrie, then they won't be hard to find for anyone else either. And sure enough, Hilde shows up to cause problems. Valkyrie attacks her without even letting the woman talk, and Hilde admits that she has gotten better since their last contest. Valkyrie accuses her of being misguided by some fallen god, and offers her a quick death to free her. But Hilde thinks it's funny that the woman who's running around as Odin's puppet thinks she's being manipulated. Seeing as how Valkyrie still doesn't understand what's going on, Hilde decides to leave. Cypher thinks the woman may have some information that they all could use, but Valkyrie doesn't think that anything that comes from one of Odin's enemies could be useful. Her motives don't make sense, but Valkyrie isn't going to deviate from her hunt for the relics to chase the woman. But she can't stop wondering why Hilde called her another one of Odin's victims. After searching around, Valkyrie and her warriors get to where she sensed one of the relics from, only to end up getting attacked by all of the other monsters that were drawn to it. They're stronger than normal, but once they were beaten, Valkyrie found out that the creatures were so strong because they were using the power of the spear Gungnir. With the creatures beaten and the spear in her hands, she heads back to Asgard to stop anyone else from trying to take it from her. Odin is obviously happy to see one of his relics brought back to him, but that doesn't mean he's giving Valkyrie a break. Instead, he sends her to a place called Lucarda, a place that Egon and Cypher had both heard of even though they're from different eras. It was a nice place during Aegon's time, but by the time Cypher was born, the kingdom would have fit in nicely with the nations on House of the Dragon. It's bloody and violent. The Valkyrie senses a remnant of a soul that could likely be another Einherjar, so the group heads off to find it. Unlike the last two she had found, this soul was aware of the monster that it had become and had separated a piece of itself from the whole to fight against the creature. The Valkyrie and her warriors get there just in time to help the woman defeat her monster side. The woman's name is Christopher, and she had been fighting to protect her land, not realizing that it had already been destroyed long after she had died. Realizing that she could continue her fight, she is more than willing to become one of the Valkyrie's warriors. Oddly enough, after the battle, the group sees Armand, who apparently comes to the area a lot to bring the people things like medicine, tools, and stuff. Since things are steadily getting worse around the world, he figured he could help the people out by running a few errands for them. In return, they give him a place to stay and a few home-cooked meals. The way he travels gives him a pretty high risk of death, but he figures everyone dies in the end anyway, so he may as well do something productive while he's alive. Valkyrie thinks it'll be better for him if he stops doing what he's doing and lives somewhere safe for as long as he can, but Armand refuses to stop searching for what he lost. She's actually curious about what the man's looking for now, but he promises he'll tell her the next time he meets because he has a feeling they'll run into each other again. Aegon's surprised that the Valkyrie is starting to show interest in something as unimportant as a human, and she doesn't know why she was so curious either, but she doesn't get time to think about it before another vision hits her. When it's over, she does admit that it is impressive that even though the world is collapsing around them, the humans still carry on instead of just curling up somewhere and dying. They may not have much in the way of strength, but they are resilient. Cypher thinks it could be something as simple as all of the weak humans have already died off. In any case, they all think that it's the job of the strong to take care of the weak. And since Valkyrie is incredibly strong, she should take some time to help the people. She doesn't think she has time to really spend helping individual people when her mission is so important. But saving the world won't really do all that much if there are no people left in it. That's a good point, one that makes Valkyrie think, but for now they need to hunt down the next relic. While Christopher had been traveling around, she'd passed an area where there were an abnormal amount of monsters, which could mean what Valkyrie is after is in that area. When they get there, the creatures have made a barrier to keep something hidden, which is probably the relic. But to get to it, the group has to cut a path through the monsters first, which isn't all that difficult. Once they've been put down and Valkyrie's had a chance to examine the barrier, she realizes that if she breaks it, it could easily destroy everything around them, including the village full of people. At first she wouldn't have cared, but because her allies ask, she lets them go evacuate the village while she tries to keep the explosion contained. They get everyone out, but it turns out to be unnecessary because Valkyrie is able to keep the explosion from doing any damage at all, and she gets her hand on the second relic and heads back to Asgard. Since she doesn't need them to come with her to talk to Odin, the Einherjar want to spend a little bit of their free time doing some training. They're all eager to do it, but Valkyrie can't give permission without Odin's approval. Surprisingly enough, he walks over to them and tells them that they can use the training grounds if they want. It's a surprise to see him up and moving, because at first he couldn't get off of his throne. He's clearly gotten stronger after all of the work Valkyrie's done, and getting Draupnir back makes things even better for him. Now there are just 2 relics left, and one is in a place called Romali, so that's the steadily growing group's next stop. The place was known for its people being very into magic, but not much else is known about them because they didn't really have a lot of contact with outsiders. There was a story about a sorceress who protected the area and never asked for anything in return, which means it's likely that if she's dead, she'll make a good addition to the Valkyrie's growing crew. Before she can seek this soul out, it actually appears to her. Her name is Taika, and she was the protector of the area. Now the place is full of monsters, and she wants the Valkyrie to deal with them before they consume her. She spent too much of her time protecting the land to let herself get turned into one of the creatures that destroys it. The Valkyrie and her crew deal with the monsters and the corrupted part of Taika's soul, and as a repayment for their help, Taika becomes the Valkyrie's 4th Einherjar. Valkyrie goes back to tracking down the relics, and she senses one nearby that's surrounded by a lot of monsters, and oddly enough, it's moving. It's not something that can just get up and walk around on its own, so that means someone or something has grabbed it. That turns out to be Hilde. She's taken the relic, and since it seems like Valkyrie hasn't stopped working for Odin, Hilde figures that it's time to finally kill the woman. But it seems like that wasn't her orders, and her boss appears to fuss at her for not immediately bringing the relic back once she got her hands on it. What was a surprise to absolutely no one, Hilde was apparently working for Fenrir. Valkyrie is ready to fight them both, but Fenrir just wants to talk to the woman that's been forced to act as Odin's slave. Fenrir has just one question for the Valkyrie who believes that Odin is working to save the world. and it's a question that she had never thought to ask. How exactly is he planning on saving the world? The wolf doesn't say anything else, but before the pair leaves, Hilde tells the Valkyrie that she should think about what Fenrir said, because the wolf is more trustworthy than Odin. And she proves that not at all by leaving the group surrounded by more monsters than they could possibly deal with. Luckily for them, Odin's power has grown enough for him to be able to send his own avatar down to help out with the fighting. He wants Valkyrie to head back to Asgard quickly because he has something that he needs to tell her. While the Valkyrie is talking to Odin, Egon and the others are talking about her and just how much she's changed since they first met. When he had first met her, she was like a soulless killing machine. But the more time they spend together, they've started to see that the Valkyrie is becoming more human, which could be a good or a bad thing. Either way, the four of them are starting to see her as more of a friend than a Terminator. As for Odin, he's not surprised that Fenrir has made her move and stolen one of the relics. He hadn't warned the Valkyrie about her, so he figures that it's his own fault. Fenrir was a god that was nearly equal in power to him, but according to him, she's pure evil. Funny how she says the same thing about him. From what he says, she had wanted the throne of Asgard and had started a war all to take the seat of power from him. She's likely recovered from her wounds just as much as Odin's recovered from his own, so he wants Valkyrie to avoid facing her and stick to purifying souls and hunting for the relics. In the meantime, Odin will try to track down Fenrir himself. Back on Midgard, Valkyrie can sense the last relic, but it's hard for her to place the exact location. She does run into Armand again, and he finally tells her that what he's looking for is actually a person, his wife. People have already told him to give up. They've told him that she's dead, but he just can't make himself accept that. Showing how much being around humans has started to change her, Valkyrie offers to help him search, but quickly changes her mind because she knows her mission is more important than a single person. But she does wish him good luck, a very human thing to do, and that causes her to have another strange vision of people that she can't see talking. Seeing her randomly zone out makes Armand get a little worried about her since that's not exactly normal. But she claims that she's fine and heads to where the last relic is, only to find that it's gone and Hilde's waiting for her. She's taken it and given it to Fenrir, and since she's finally accepted that Valkyrie will never stop being Odin's tool, she's decided to kill her. While she's a very strong fighter, she's missing one very important thing: allies. One-on-one, Hilde could have likely won the fight, but up against a Valkyrie and 4 Einherjar, she loses. Seeing how powerful she is, Hilde can't understand why the Valkyrie still follows Odin without even understanding why he has her collecting so many souls. Instead of letting herself be killed, Hilde runs away. And because on some level Hilde's words are bothering her, Valkyrie doesn't finish her off when she has the chance. Which means she has to let Odin know that not only did she fail to get the last relic, but she didn't kill Hilde either. And in the midst of all of that, she's starting to have doubts. Odin is highly upset at what's happened, so much so that his usually pleasant tone leaves completely. He calls Valkyrie 7 kinds of idiot for messing things up and forcing him to change his tactics. One of his avatars has tracked Fenrir down, and even though he said she shouldn't, he is sending her to deal with the god. He's not sending her empty-handed. He gives her Gleipnir, a magical rope that had held Fenrir, and it's one that she can't break free of. After that, he sends Valkyrie to meet up with his avatar and detain the god. It sounds like an impossible job to her allies, and with Valkyrie having doubts of her own, her nerves are starting to get to her a bit, but she heads out to deal with Fenrir like she's been ordered. Her and her crew meet up with Odin's avatar at the location, but the area is protected by a barrier that not even Odin can break. But since she was weakened the same as he was, Odin is positive that there's a weak point in the barrier somewhere. They just have to find it. Before they can even get started with the search, Fenrir snatches Valkyrie and her crew away to a place where she can talk to them without Odin listening in. The first thing that she lets Valkyrie know is that just like her Einherjar, she was a human before Odin remade her. He uses humans to make all of his servants to help him with this mission of eating souls. Mortal souls are a source of power for the top tier gods, and they use lesser gods to gather them. In other words, Odin has been sending Valkyrie on very violent trips to his version of Whole Foods, and all of his talk of saving the world is a load of crap. His main concern is keeping his seat of power. Valkyrie doesn't fully believe Fenrir because she hasn't really done anything to prove herself all that honest either. But she points out that if everything Odin was doing was on the up and up, why would he hide the truth from his servant? Odin would destroy the entire world to save his position. And after saying that, Fenrir leaves because she can see that Valkyrie is actually considering what she said, and the god wants to see what the girl does with that information. Valkyrie heads back to Asgard to let Odin know what happened, but she's obviously conflicted and her people can see it. They all heard what Fenrir said too, and because of who she is, whatever Valkyrie decides to do, they'll stick with her. But taking Fenrir's words as truth would be a mistake too, so Valkyrie decides to continue with her mission and report to Odin. When he hears that she didn't manage to deal with Fenrir once they were face to face, he reminds her that the world is on the brink of extinction, and if she doesn't deal with Fenrir, the whole thing will end. She vows to complete her mission and goes back to her people to get ready, but she's still unsure about what to do. She thinks it might be a good idea to just ask Odin what's really going on, but all of her Einherjar agree that doing that would probably get her killed. Fenrir does need to be dealt with regardless of Odin's plans, so they decide to go back to deal with her and figure out what to do next afterwards. While making their way back to Fenrir, they run into Armand again, because apparently the world is a really small place, and he asks Valkyrie to come with him for a moment. He wants to show her something. Normally she would have said no, but she needs more time to figure out what she wants to do, so she decides to go with him. He takes her to a field full of flowers that was extremely important to him and the person that he'd been searching for. He figured that he'd visit the place one last time before he finally gave up on his search and accepted the fact that Nora was dead. She had been attacked by monsters in the very spot that they're standing in, and that was the last time he had seen her. He had hoped that she'd escaped, so he had kept searching, but he knows that's not the case, so he's finally decided to go and settle down somewhere. He had just felt compelled to tell Valkyrie about it before he left. He honestly couldn't even understand why he wanted to tell her in particular. She stopped hearing anything he said after he'd mentioned the name Nora, since she was pulled into another vision. This one was very clear, showing her running from monsters with Armand. They had split up so he could lead them away, only for Odin himself to show up and take her soul to make her into a Valkyrie. In the process, he had removed all memory of her face from Armand, so even if he had seen her, he wouldn't know who she was. Armand saw the same vision that she did, and that undid Odin's spell. Since he's finally found her, he wants her to run away with him and let someone else deal with Odin and Fenrir, but she can't. There isn't anyone else to do it. But once she's done, she promises to come back to him. With her mind free from Odin's blocks, something else happens to the Valkyrie too. The strange soul flowers that she couldn't understand before became clear to her, and it lets her know the whole story of what really happened to the world. Originally, the world tree fed on the souls of the dead and used them to create new life. But every now and then a soul would refuse to return to the tree, becoming an undead. When that happened, Yggdrasil would send people who had the power to find souls after it to bring it back. Those were the gods. After a while, the gods started to get interested in the power that souls had, and they started eating them. They stopped bringing souls to the world tree, and the ones that they didn't eat fell back to Midgard and became undead. Since the world tree was no longer getting food, it died and Ragnarok began. That put the tree and the world in a loop of death and rebirth. The world would end, be reborn, and end again, over and over and over. The prophecy said that the great wolf would eat the Allfather and the world would start over, but Odin didn't want to die, so he used Gleipnir to imprison Fenrir, then went around eating all of the souls that he could. That made Fenrir hate Odin, and since Odin pissed off a lot of people by being an unlikable prick, one of his Valkyries freed Fenrir, which started the war in Asgard. That war stopped the flow of souls, and the world tree died, which led right back to Ragnarok. Knowing the truth, Nora decides that she's done working for Odin, but she still wants to save the world, and she will do that even if it means killing Fenrir and Odin both. Her Einherjar are cool with whatever she decides to do, so they head off to deal with Fenrir first. They make their way down into Fenrir's domain, and on the way they come across Hilde, who was fighting against some creature, and losing. Nora jumps in to save her, much to Hilde's surprise, but the former Valkyrie wanted to thank the woman for helping her realize the truth. But she'll do that and tell the woman her plan after they deal with the monster that was trying to eat them. When the battle ends, both Hilde and Nora's minds link, and Nora realizes that Hilde was Odin's servant before her, the one who had been sent out to retrieve human souls after he had locked up Fenrir. But Hilde saw that something was off. Just like Nora had started to have doubts and flashes of her mortal life, Hilde had too, but she didn't get her memories back until after Odin had made her kill her own parents. That rightfully made her turn against the gods, and she released Fenrir so she could kill them. While Nora was seeing Hilde's past, she was reliving Nora's. So since they both know where the other is coming from, Nora tells Hilde her plan. She wants to find out if the two head gods are necessary for the world to exist, or if killing them will still allow the world to live. Once she finds out what she needs to, she'll help Hilde kill Odin and Fenrir. The woman's not unreasonable. She'll give Nora time to talk to them before she stabs them, so they all go to face Fenrir. Nora gets right to the point. She wants to know what would Fenrir do if she took Odin's place. Depending on her answer, that will decide if she lives or not. Fenrir is not worried because she doesn't think Nora will kill her, mainly because the world needs at least one pureblood god to exist. That means either Odin or her. Since Nora wants to save the world, she'll have to let Fenrir live, because Odin clearly won't save it. What the wolf doesn't realize is that there's another option. Since there are two Valkyries there working together, the combined powers of two half-gods would be enough to do the job of a single pureblood, meaning Hilde and Nora both can get what they want. The world can be saved, and the remaining gods can die. Seeing what's about to happen, Fenrir consumes the power of the two relics that she has and attacks, and she dies. The two Valkyrie take the relics that Fenrir had, and they head back to Asgard to confront Odin. When Nora talks to him about how he casually destroyed human lives for power, he points out that humans are no different from cows to the gods, and no one ever felt guilty for eating a burger. That's all the two Valkyrie need to hear to decide to put an end to him too. And since Fenrir and Odin were evenly matched and the two Valkyrie were able to handle her, taking down Odin takes just as much effort. With Odin dead, all of the power that he had collected flows into Hilde and Nora, and they give it all to the World Tree. That along with all of the souls of the dead, and that includes her Einherjar. They're not sad about it. They're happy that they actually got to fulfill their duty, and if they're lucky, they may see each other again once they're reborn. With that done, there is still plenty of work for the two new gods to do. But before they get started with all of that, Hilde sends Nora off to do what she had promised, and that's to meet back up with Armand. This concludes the story of Valkyrie Elysium. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and if you really want to show your support, you can donate to the channel through the link in the description. Until next time, guys. Later. Yuffie Kisaragi is a ninja from Wutai, sent to Midgar under orders to sneak into Shinra headquarters to steal some super powerful materia. To do that, she's supposed to team up with the terrorist or freedom fighter group depending on your point of view, Avalanche. The whole point of the mission is to prove to Shinra that Wutai is not a nation to be taken lightly. But unfortunately, they sent a girl who's, to put it delicately, a bit of an idiot. She didn't remember exactly where she was supposed to meet up with Avalanche, so she snuck into the city in a mostly abandoned location that's full of some very dangerous creatures. Fortunately, while Yuffie's a bit of an idiot, she can actually fight, so she manages to make it to Sector 7 just in time to catch a news broadcast from Shinra. Recently, Avalanche attacked Mako Reactor number 5, but Shinra has managed to get everything back under control. They're still hunting for the culprit since they also blew up Mako Reactor number 1 a little while earlier. Yuffie's excited to see that Avalanche is putting in a bit of work against the giant planet-destroying corporation, but she thinks that she could do a better job, something she says way too loudly considering the fact that she's in a crowded area talking about committing acts of terror. Fortunately for her, her contact, a man named Jija, finds her, which isn't hard since she's the only person wearing a Moogle poncho, and takes her to the group's hideout. One of them anyway. He introduces her to some of the people she'll be working with, Polk, Nayo, and a guy named Billy Bob. But the person she was expecting to meet, Sonon, isn't there. He made it to the city a few days ago according to Nayo, but he's been enjoying himself out in the city, so there's no telling when he'll get back. Jija wants Yuffie to wait at the hideout for Sonon while he heads off to pick up their Shinra IDs. The company treats all materia like weapons, so they'll probably have it stored somewhere in the advanced weaponry division, deep in the basement of the building, and Yuffie will need a fake ID to get in there. The building itself is the giant one in the middle of Midgar, so it's not exactly hard to find. But it is pretty hard to sneak into since it's highly guarded, and security is even more diligent than normal because of all the terrorist activity. It'll probably be a good idea for Yuffie to wait until things settle down a bit before she tries to breach their defenses. Instead of just sitting in the room, she wanders around the city a bit, and when she makes it back, Sonon shows up. He was trained to fight by Yuffie's father, but he'd never actually seen her before in person since she doesn't really like her dad all that much. She's completely different from what he expected, but he's perfectly fine with letting her lead the mission. A pigeon brings a message saying that some packages that Nayo's people have been waiting for have come in, and the spot to pick them up isn't that far away from there. Since they need to check out more of the city anyway, Yuffie and Sonon tag along. They have to go through a very rough part of town, which is why Nayo wanted them to come along anyway. Part of what they're picking up are more ID cards for Yuffie and Sonon, since you need a lot of them to get anywhere in Midgar. The entire place was built by Shinra, so the city runs like a very big office building broken into different sectors that can't be accessed without the proper credentials. While they're walking, they catch sight of Barrett and Tifa coming back to 7th Heaven after their attack on Reactor 5. And Barrett's pretty upset that the president of Shinra claimed that Avalanche was working with Wutai to carry out the attacks, all so they can justify retaliating against the nation. What's just as bad is the fact that a guy named Don Corneo has his people out looking for them. Barrett doesn't want to waste time on Corneo, but Tifa heads off to deal with him anyway. When Yuffie hears that they were the ones who blew up the reactor, she wants to chat with them. But since it's very likely that Shinra's after them, it would be a good way to ruin their mission fast if they get involved with that group. Nao's not really a fan of the actions of Barrett's little subgroup of Avalanche, since they aren't all that worried about collateral damage as long as Shinra falls. But since the company did major damage to her home, Yuffie kinda agrees with them, which is part of why Nao's group teamed up with Yuffie in the first place. They wanted to keep her from working with Barrett because that would have just increased the destruction they'd cause to Midgar. She wants to take Shinra down, but not at the cost of her home. She is a little curious about this so-called ultimate materia that Yuffie wants, but what it does doesn't necessarily matter all that much. Sneaking into Shinra's HQ and stealing their most precious possession will prove that even though they've hurt Wutai, they haven't beaten them yet. On the way to the pickup spot, some members of Corneo's gang go to recruit Nio to be one of Corneo's brides, which means exactly what you think it does. So Yuffie, with some backup from Sonon, beats them up. But not because they were trying to take Nio to become an OnlyFans model. It was more because they called Yuffie a little kid and weren't interested in her. I told you before that she was kinda dumb. Before the fight leads to anyone's death, another of Corneo's henchmen comes running up saying that a really hot chick fell right into their lap and she's actually eager to go with them to Corneo's mansion. They leave, which gives Yuffie and the others a clear place to wait for their contact, save for a guy who's wearing a robe and walking around with Mako poisoning, which is what happens when someone can't become a member of Soldier, or they fall prey to any number of Shinra's other experiments. Their contact shows up with Yuffie and Sonon's IDs for their train ride, but they'll still need Avalanche to help them get through security, so it's not time to infiltrate the Shinra building just yet. And plans change even further when a messenger pigeon with a note from Jija tells the three of them to meet him at the Sector 7 pillar fast. The three of them see him getting chased by some Shinra soldiers, so Yuffie and Sonon follow after them while Nio goes to tell the others what happened. The man is pretty good at running from the cops. Apparently he's done it before. The fact that he leads them through a monster-infested factory doesn't help their situation, but it doesn't help Yuffie catch him either since everything is trying to eat them all. His run causes the other soldiers to call for backup, and they eventually catch up to him and start trying to beat information out of him, so Sonon wants to cause a distraction while Yuffie frees him. But she doesn't understand that ninjas are supposed to be stealthy, so she jumps up into plain view and not only removes her Moogle poncho and shouts out her name, but she falls off of the beams. Fall damage apparently doesn't exist in this world either, so she doesn't die, and she gets the soldiers' attention like she needed to. That gives Sonon time to free Jija, but it also causes the guards to call in a giant armed robot centipede complete with a lot of weapons. Not really sure why Shinra decided to go with that design, but the thing does put up a decent fight. Still, it gets taken down by 2 people, so how good was the weapon really? Jija is fine and he's able to hand Yuffie what he got for them. Employee ID cards that will let them walk right into the Shinra building and access any floor. He thinks the 2 of them should hurry up and do whatever they're planning, because he's heard that Shinra plans on destroying the entirety of Sector 7. That's not their issue, but he does plan on telling Barrett about it. Since that's taken care of, Yuffie and Sonon head back to Nio's base to get their help getting on the train, but while she was gone, Nio's base got discovered by the military. Fortunately, none of them were there to get caught, so Yuffie heads straight to the train. The train platform is packed, and since the Sector 5 attack, that station is outright closed, so the trains aren't running on schedule, which means when they do run, everyone tries to catch a ride, so Yuffie and Sonon squeeze into the very packed train. Yuffie isn't all that good with the motion of the train, which reminds Sonon of his sister Melfi. She would get sick on everything from boats to chocobos, and like Sonon, she had trained under Yuffie's dad, but near the end of the war with Shinra, one of their mechs attacked a crowd of people, and Melfi died trying to save them. That's why Sonon wants Shinra gone, and that's the least of their atrocities. At that very moment, President Shinra is talking to 2 of his executives, Heidegger and Reeve, about their plan to destroy Sector 7 entirely by dropping the plate onto the entire area, which would kill about 50,000 people. Reeve doesn't want to do it, but it's not up for debate. The president is going to do it, and there's nothing that anyone can do to stop it. The Shinra building is full of people, including reporters who are always annoying, but that makes it easy for Yuffie and Sonon to get on the elevator. And that's where things stop being easy, because Scarlet, one of the top brass at Shinra, gets on the elevator with them. She immediately recognizes them as being from Wutai and taunts them a bit, but for once Yuffie is smart enough not to take the bait. That doesn't change the fact that Scarlet locks them in and forces them to wander through her domain. She's the one in charge of the Advanced Weaponry Division, and she's gonna test her new toys on her foreign visitors. Sonon wants to kill her personally since her tech killed his sister, but there's no way to do that without going through the woman's gauntlet. She throws all types of stuff at the two of them, and she's somewhat impressed by their skills, but she's more interested in why they're there in the first place. For them to be as good as they are, they're clearly ninjas, so she wants her people to figure out what they're planning while still trying to kill them, of course. After wandering around a bit, the two of them finally come across what may be the materia they're looking for, but it turns out to be a dud, and a perfect spot for an ambush. They survive the fight, something else that Scarlet and her people watch. With as much as Yuffie has blurted it out, Scarlet's people found out that the pair are after materia, which the woman thinks is completely insane. Scarlet figured they'd be after something more interesting, but since she knows, she decides to talk to them through a very large hologram that freaks Yuffie out. She sends them through another area, claiming that they'll find what they want there, but it's clearly a trap, one that they'll willingly spring. Scarlet sent the two of them into the area where they test their most dangerous equipment, and after they cut through it all, they reached the area where Scarlet wanted them to be so she could test her newest bit of battle armor. Despite having made an impressive weapon, it can't match the ninja's skills. Scarlet's already figured out what she should do better next time, and even though the machine was beaten, she's still not worried, because now that she's used the intruders for what she needed, she called for reinforcements, and they aren't coming just to detain them. She called for one of the more dangerous living weapons, a man named Nero, but of course she refuses to tell Yuffie and Sonon what she's done. She is a little shocked that Yuffie knows about the special materia that Shinra has been working on, but she figures that means there's a mole somewhere in the organization. But for the moment, that doesn't matter, since the materia isn't ready. They had to delay it to move forward with the plan to drop the plate on Sector 7. Then they'll blame Avalanche and Wutai. Yuffie wants to get more information out of her, but some of Shinra's more advanced soldiers show up, and the pair are forced to fight until they're pushed into a combat simulator that Scarlet sets to the highest setting, while Nero and the others wait outside of the door. The guy is insane and uses his very odd powers to kill his own allies because stories still haven't found a better way to show just how evil someone is other than having them kill their own people. Yuffie and Sonon overcome the weird computer-generated creatures and step out of the room to see all of the dead soldiers. Nero has killed even more of them, and because Shinra thinks of all of its people as nothing more than test subjects, some of their researchers stand outside of the room in what they think is a secure zone to observe the battle and to keep Nero contained. The fighting causes his powers to go out of control, so they try to restrain him, but he breaks free, puts Yuffie through a window in a way that definitely broke all of her, and kills the scientist for interfering, before going back to fighting Sonon and Yuffie. As the battle drags on, he grows more and more unstable, and the weird darkness that he's using starts to cover everything, but Yuffie and her partner manage to beat him. He seems happy to actually lose, so he disappears into darkness, but as soon as the pair gets to the elevator, he reappears and attacks them from behind. Yuffie doesn't see the attack coming, but Sonon does, and he gets impaled so Yuffie can escape. She's distraught over Sonon dying to save her, but things get worse as she makes it outside of the Shinra building just in time to watch the Sector 7 plate get destroyed, meaning it's very likely that everyone she'd met on her mission is dead. That just makes her more determined to take Shinra down. And fortunately, she's not the only one to survive. Barrett and his group made it out of the city too, and that means that if the remake follows the old game, Yuffie will meet them in a forest, steal their materia, and eventually team up with them in Wutai. The question is, will things follow the same path as before? We'll just have to wait and see, but for now, we've reached the end of this story. If you've enjoyed it, hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and if you really want to show your support, you can donate to the channel through the link in the description. Until next time, guys, later. It's been 7 years since the first conduits or people with special abilities appeared, and it's only natural that once people start to get special powers, they'll start to do crazy stuff. And that led to the creation of the Department of Unified Protection, whose primary goal is to round up any and all conduits and hold them in a prison called the Curtain K Station. That's where Abigail Walker, better known as Fetch because Reasons, is being held. Now this place isn't just a prison. It's more of a recruitment facility for the DUP, and Augustine, the woman in charge, wants Fetch to join them. But Fetch has been through some traumatic events that she needs to work through before she can do pretty much anything, and Augustine can't help her do that if she doesn't know the woman's story. So after a bit of coaxing, Fetch finally starts to tell her what happened to her and how she ended up there. Her life had been rough from the minute her parents found out about her powers. The minute they learned that she was different, they immediately called the DUP to get her taken away. But her brother Brent helped her run away before they could get there. The two of them lived on the street and did a lot of unsavory things to get by. But it was the job that they pulled 2 years ago, the one that was supposed to get them out of Seattle altogether, that led to things going bad. Fetch didn't want to do the job at all, but her brother said that it would pay enough for them to disappear entirely, and he would take care of all of it. All she had to do was avoid using her powers until everything was done. That whole not using her powers thing failed immediately since the cops came around looking for her brother, and to distract them she runs off with her super speed, which also makes her glow like a neon sign. That makes the cops completely forget about her brother and call the DUP to deal with the rogue conduit. Knowing there's a conduit in the area would cause the DUP to flood the place, but Fetch figured that she and her brother would be long gone before they got there. But how often do things ever go as planned? Her running off like that made things way too hot in the area for Brent to complete the job, so Fetch heads off to do it herself. He was supposed to get a red duffel bag from a penthouse, and even though he doesn't have a clue what's in it, somebody's paying him a whole lot of money to grab it, so it's worth taking. Obviously, a lot of other people were after it too, because when Fetch reaches the penthouse, some people have already broken in and killed the guy Brent was supposed to meet. Not wanting any witnesses, they try to kill Fetch, but on top of being able to run fast, she can shoot lasers from her fingertips, so killing her isn't exactly easy, which the small army of men find out the hard way. Unfortunately, before she can get the bag, a bomb goes off in the room, destroying everything and blowing Fetch out of the window. She calls Brent to let him know that a bunch of Russians had beat her to the place, and since they're part of a gang called the Occurrence, he knows exactly who they are. To make a bad situation worse, if they knew about the penthouse, then they'll know about Brent's boat, which means the two of them need to leave immediately. So Fetch starts to head to the boat, but Brent calls her and tells her to stay away since the Occurrence have already made it there. She's obviously not going to leave her brother to fight alone, but she tends to have panic attacks in stressful situations, and if she loses control of her powers while she's fighting the gang members, they'll kill her. She ignores her brother's warnings and heads there anyway, but when she gets there, the boat's on fire, and the only thing she finds of her brother's is his cell phone. Of course, she starts to freak out and blame herself, because even back when the two of them had been in danger, they had one rule: Fetch was never supposed to use her powers, and the moment she decided to break that rule, she lost her brother. She spent the whole night looking for him, but when she couldn't find him anywhere, she went back to the dock and ran into a weird and clearly shady man who just so happened to be looking for Brent too. When Fetch realizes that this guy's not with the Occurrence and he's planning on looking for Brent, she wants to work with him to hunt him down, but the guy's not all that interested in working with a seemingly distraught girl. He changes his mind fast when he realizes that she's the sister Brent was always talking about. The guy's name is Shane, and aside from being someone who worked with Brent, he's also a bit of a weirdo. Oddball or not, he's positive that the Occurrence have kidnapped Brent since they've snatched a lot of his people, and he has a few ideas about where they might be holding them. After Fetch shows him that she's a conduit, he points her in the general direction of where Brent might be, and he promises to call her on Brent's phone if he gets any news. The thing is, the Occurrence don't exactly sit still for long, so once he finds them, Fetch will have to be ready to move. While she's running around hunting for her brother, some of the Occurrence find her, and instead of questioning any of them like she should have, she kills them all. That's not the most efficient way of tracking her brother down, but lucky for her, Shane's gotten a bit of information about what the Occurrence are about to do next. They have a large shipment of guns that they're about to receive, so if Fetch helps him steal them, he'll be able to have 50 armed men out on the streets kicking in doors and hunting for her brother. Since she has no leads of her own, she goes to help Shane with his plan to relieve the gang of their guns. Turns out his plan was just to break into their building, load the weapons in his truck, and drive off with Fetch riding on top of the thing and shooting the people who come after them. Among the ranks of bad plans, this one sits pretty high on that list, but despite being attacked by both gang members and cops since the two of them are driving through the city destroying stuff, they manage to get the weapons to Shane's people, and he keeps his word and sends them out to hunt for Brent. Unfortunately, some of his crew gets seen snooping around by the Occurrence, which forces Fetch to go out and play security guard for Shane's people. Since they are looking for a brother and she wants to get back at the Occurrence for taking him in the first place, it's a win-win for her. For someone who spent most of her time not using her powers, Fetch is very good at mass murder, which helps motivate Shane's people to hunt a little bit harder for her brother, if for no other reason than to keep her from shooting her lasers at them. One of his people heard that a high-ranking Occurrence was seen out in Georgetown, and if Fetch follows him, the man may lead her to where they're keeping Brent. Granted, walking behind him is not gonna work because honestly that never should work since it's pretty easy to see when somebody's following you. So Shane figures using the city surveillance cameras is a better way to follow the guy. Considering the fact that hacking requires a unique set of skills, it's not easier to do at all. But he already has a woman named Jenny tapped into the system, and she links up with Fetch through her phone to give her a link to the cameras. Jenny's a city worker who owes Shane, so she knows quite a bit about how detailed their facial recognition software is, so she has no problem finding Fetch's guy. They see that the man was not so subtly following a woman. Apparently, aside from murder, kidnapping people is a normal part of the Occurrence business practices, and that woman that the guy was following was next on their list of victims. Using the cameras to track him, Fetch and Jenny see the man kill a guy who tried to help the woman before he snatches her and puts her in a car. Fetch was too late to save the woman, but her kidnapper dropped his phone, which Jenny can use to figure out where he spends most of his time. Because this city is just as bad as Gotham, Fetch doesn't get a break at all. While Jenny's trying to find out where the Occurrence take their prisoners, Shane calls to say that his people have gotten attacked and are pinned down, so Fetch heads off to back them up while increasing her body count. The Occurrence aren't exactly happy with Shane's people since they stole his guns and started breaking into their stuff, so this fight has turned into a full-fledged gang war. Shane's happy about that since it means Fetch can put a real dent in his competition, but she's not exactly excited about it because the more chaos she causes, the quicker the DUP will show up. And if they do, it'll make it way harder for her to find her brother, especially if they catch her and lock her up. The time it took for Fetch to put a serious dent in the Occurrence members was enough for Jenny to find out where the hostages are being held, which means it's time to finally hunt down her brother. It definitely won't be easy because after everything she's done, they're on high alert. The gang has a lot of people locked up in shipping containers, but with them having to deal with a rampaging conduit, Brent manages to get free, and he calls his sister to let her know that he's alright, at least for the moment. There's still a lot of people around, so he hides while Fetch tries to get away. As luck would have it, that's the moment the DUP decides to show up, so since Fetch can't get to her brother, she sends Shane over to his hiding place so he can pick him up while she tries to escape from the DUP. Even though the DUP soldiers are conduits too, Fetch gets away from them and gets to her brother just in time to see Shane take him hostage. Since Fetch has proven to be so useful, Shane doesn't want her to stop working for him until he's taken over the city, and the only way to make her work for him is to take her brother. But he promises to let him go after she does a few more jobs for him, which anyone with 2 brain cells knows is a lie, but unfortunately for her, she doesn't have a choice but to play along. With the Occurrence gang pretty much dealt with, Shane wants to force the chief of police to make a deal with him. So he has Fetch doing a lot of things to make life uncomfortable for the city, and every time she completes a job, he claims she's just one step closer to getting her brother back. She knows he's lying, and since the city is full of DUP members now, she figures she needs to come up with another plan to get her brother away from Shane. That's going to be a little difficult because the DUP has started rounding up Shane's people to draw out Fetch, and Shane wants her to free them. It's not like she has a choice, so she heads off to attack the DUP, who are much harder to deal with than the regular gang members since the group is full of conduits who were trained to catch other conduits. In the past, Fetch wouldn't have had any chance against the conduit catchers, but she's been using her powers so much that she's gotten far better with them, so now she's basically a one-woman army. She easily frees Shane's people, so he's nice enough to let her talk to her brother so she can know that he's at least still alive. But he's only going to stay that way for as long as she works for Shane, and everyone knows that he won't ever let either of them go. Jenny's aware of that too, and since Shane's been holding things on her that she doesn't want to talk about, she knows exactly what Fetch is going through, and she's willing to help her, discreetly. Shane's been getting police officers to work for him by using the oldest trick in the book, bribery. And by buying off the cops, he's getting access to their drones, which lets him watch the entire city. Fetch will never be able to look for her brother in secret as long as Shane has access to those. So Jenny starts feeding her the routes that the drones travel on so she can blow them up. Since the things are about $90,000 a piece, they won't be replacing them anytime soon. With the drones dealt with, Jenny sends Fetch a location where she thinks Shane is keeping his prisoners. He started doing the same thing that the Occurrence had, and he's been locking his enemies up inside of cargo containers. Her brother is probably in one of those, but once Fetch starts attacking his people, she won't have a whole lot of time to find her brother before Shane kills him. The good news is one of her powers is super speed, so she gets to the containers and deals with the guards before Shane ever finds out. The problem is all of the containers are empty. Shane had figured something was up when the police drones started blowing up. The only person who knew he had access to those was Jenny. So to see if she had turned on him, he let her get fake info that said that he was keeping prisoners in crates to see if she'd tell Fetch. Since she did, it proved that she had turned on him, so he did the only thing that you do with traitors. He kills her and leaves her body in an alley so Fetch can understand what'll happen to her brother if she breaks his rules. Now that she understands her place in all of this, Shane has another job for her. He wants a meeting with the chief of police. But the man has a whole lot of cops around him, so he needs Fetch to lure them away however she can. If his meeting goes well, Shane figures he'll finally be in control of all of Seattle, and since he'll finally have what he wants, he'll be able to let Brent and Fetch leave. With that little bit of extra motivation, Fetch starts causing as much chaos in the city as she can, which draws the cops off, letting Shane get his alone time with the chief. With all of the chaos Fetch causes, the chief agrees to give Shane the same deal he gave to the Occurrence, as long as Fetch leaves the city. Since he has what he wants, Shane tells Fetch where he's keeping her brother. She heads over there immediately before Shane changes his mind, but when she gets there, it turns out to be another trap. Shane didn't want her getting her brother then coming after him, so he locked her in a building and fills it with poison. While that was a pretty smart way to kill her, he greatly underestimated how powerful Fetch was, and she breaks out of the building. Since Shane wanted her dead, she decides it may be time to go after him, but she has no idea where to find him or her brother. So she beats up some of his people, steals one of their headsets so she can figure out where they were heading, and decides that the best way to draw Shane out is to blow up all of his trucks that are shipping drugs through the city. She destroys them all and kills a lot of Shane's people in the process, which pisses him off enough to make him tell Fetch where he is so he can kill her himself. As soon as she walks into the building, Shane sneaks up behind her and doses her with some drugs that makes her hallucinate. Then he has his people try to kill her, which is actually a pretty good plan. It still doesn't work. She kills them all, but what she didn't realize is that Shane had brought her brother into the building, and in her doped up state, she kills him. While she's sitting there crying over her brother's dead body, the DUP capture her, which is how she ended up in Augustine's prison. While Augustine had made Fetch tell her story, the woman had already knew what happened. Not only that, she had found and captured Shane. As soon as Fetch sees him, she blows up the entire side of the prison. I have no clue how he managed to live through that, but after all of the chaos her attack caused, Shane manages to steal one of the DUP vehicles and runs away. Fetch chases after him, along with a whole lot of other DUP members. She fights her way past them, and after a long time she finally gets to kill Shane. Augustine's people were watching the whole incident, and now that she's executed Shane, Augustine thinks that Fetch is ready for the next step on her path to becoming a DUP agent. She's not the only one that's on this forced conscription plan, but since none of these conduits have volunteered for this, they're planning on escaping at the first chance that they get. And that chance is coming up very, very soon. This concludes the story of Infamous First Light. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Donate to the channel if you can, and I'll see you all next time. Miles Morales was a normal teenager living in Brooklyn with his parents, but all of that changed when his dad died in a bombing at City Hall. Peter Parker, also known as Spider-Man, and his Aunt May helped him through that tough time while the whole Devil's Breath incident was going on in the city. And by the end of it all, Miles had gotten bit by a genetically modified spider that gave him spider powers, and of course Peter starts to train him. Now he gets to do the whole double life thing. He and his mom move to Harlem for a change of scenery, and that's where the story begins. Miles gets a text from Peter letting him know that the convoy is leaving, so he suits up to go and meet him. The cops are finally sending the prisoners that escaped from the raft back to the prison, and Peter and Miles are going to tag along since the Rhino is a part of the prisoners getting transported. They're moving him in a pretty stupid way, attached to the bottom of a helicopter, and naturally the cables start to break, so Miles tries to stop it, but he's new to this whole thing and doesn't do a good job, which causes it to crash and release the Rhino, who of course, completely on accident, frees a lot of the other prisoners. Peter goes to deal with the Rhino while Miles captures the prisoners. Dealing with Rhino while trying to keep the extra strong armored nutjob from killing people is pretty rough, and it gets worse when he runs Peter through a Roxxon power plant that blows out the power of a big part of the city. Miles is thrown away from the explosion, but Peter's pulled right through the middle of it, and he gets knocked unconscious, leaving Miles to fight the Rhino alone. That's pretty bad, but Miles' mutation isn't the same as Peter's, and he has a few powers that Peter doesn't. One of those is the ability to shock people with a touch, and no matter how strong you are, getting tased hurts. That lets Miles put Rhino down for long enough for Peter to recover, and for Simon Krieger, the leader of Roxxon, to show up with his security to detain the Rhino. Miles and Peter kinda destroyed his building, but he was planning on demolishing it anyway. Miles still doesn't feel comfortable leaving the Rhino with Krieger, but he says his troops can handle it, and since Peter says it's fine, the two Spider-Men leave. They're both excited about Miles' new powers, and under normal circumstances, they run all types of tests to see what he can actually do. But Peter is going to be leaving town for a few weeks. Mary Jane is going overseas on a project for the Daily Bugle, and she requested that Peter takes a job as her photographer. He couldn't pass up the opportunity to spend more time with MJ, but Miles doesn't think he's ready to be the only Spider-Man in the city. Peter disagrees. Even though Miles messed up with the helicopter, he did make up for it with the Rhino. And after 8 years as Spider-Man, Peter has more than a few mistakes under his own belt. Since he thinks Miles is ready, he gives him an early Christmas present, and he heads off while Miles heads to meet his best friend Genki to show him what Peter gave him, which turns out to be his very own slightly high-tech spider suit that comes equipped with a radio that's automatically set to pick up J. Jonah Jameson's anti-Spider-Man podcast, probably because Peter likes to torture himself. Miles swings off to test his new suit, while Genki heads back to Miles' apartment, and because New York, at least in the comic book world, is one of the most dangerous places in the world, Genki sees some people breaking into Roxxon Plaza on his way home. So Miles goes there because he's Spider-Man. The place is the home to one of Roxxon's biggest projects, the Nuform reactor. Once it's ready to go, the thing should be able to power all of Harlem for a fraction of the current cost, all due to a new fuel called Nuform. It's eco-friendly, and Roxxon plans on spreading it worldwide, which sounds good and valuable, which is why some very tech-savvy criminals are in the process of trying to steal some. This group is led by somebody called the Tinkerer, and they broke in to get information on the different Nuform shipping routes. But after dealing with them, Roxxon's security shows up, so Miles doesn't have time to get more information. Plus his mom is wondering where he is, so he sneaks in his apartment in a way that will definitely get him caught one day, changes clothes, and gets ready for dinner. His mom's in the middle of planning her campaign rally since she's running for public office, but she still made a nice dinner and invited one of Miles' friends over who he hadn't seen in a long time, a girl named Finn. She and Miles had been best friends before he had got accepted into a special high school, but they had lost touch, which is why his mom decided to bring her over for Christmas dinner. Things have changed, obviously, but she's still big into biotech, something she and Miles got into because of her brother Rick, who works at Roxxon. But that's a bit of a touchy subject, since Rio Morales is running a very anti-Roxxon campaign. But that's not the only thing that's bothering Finn, and with Miles knowing his friend, he catches it. Since it's Christmas, she doesn't want to talk about whatever it is that's bothering her, but they'll chat about it tomorrow when they hang out. Because Genki doesn't seem to sleep, by the time the next morning rolls around, he's designed what has to be the single dumbest thing a smart person could make, an app that lets people send direct requests for help straight to Miles. If you've been on social media for more than a few minutes, then you know that this app wouldn't make it an hour before it's full of all types of inappropriate stuff. And of course it'd take a day or two for one of Spider-Man's enemies to send him somewhere so they could just kill him. Everything does not need to be made into an app. But because stories don't work like real life, Miles gets a request for some help with the trains at Harlem Station. And it comes from a man named Aaron Davis, who just so happens to be Miles' uncle. He doesn't have a clue that Miles is Spider-Man, so this is just a coincidence. Maybe. Either way, it would look pretty bad to ignore the very first call to his new app. So Miles swings off to see what the problem is. Somebody's seemingly hacking into the train station's sensors for some reason, and that's causing bad data to come through from the main relay, which could cause little issues like train crashes, derailments, and death, which is a little bit of a problem. On top of that, Aaron heard about the break-in at Roxxon Plaza by the group that Miles fought. They called themselves the Underground, and Aaron saw some of them hanging around his place when he went to work. The gang's been around for a while, but they seem to have gotten a new boss, the Tinkerer. So for now, there's no telling what they're gonna do, but it obviously won't be good. Sure enough, Miles finds members of the Underground using some very high-tech gadgets to disrupt the train sensors, which he breaks, which causes the gang members to try to kill him, unsuccessfully of course. Aaron calls Miles through the app, another feature that would definitely be abused by everyone, to tell him that the signal's back, but there are no trains on the tracks, which means that there was more sabotage at the train yards that Miles goes to check out. As one might expect, more of the Underground are there tearing stuff up, so Miles does his Spider-Man thing and takes them down in ways that are only non-lethal because the game says so, before he gets to work manually putting the trains back on the tracks since the controls are pretty busted. With it all said and done, Aaron tells Miles to swing back by so he can give him a gift to show his appreciation for his help, but on his way back the Underground causes another problem. Since their more subtle sabotage failed, they just decided to go to the central hub where Aaron is and blow it up. Miles stops them with a little help from the police, and as a gift, Aaron gives him a pass for free train rides for a year, complete with his full government name on the card, because regardless of how you try to hide your face, people who know you can easily recognize your voice and the way you move, which is why it wasn't hard for Aunt May to figure out that Peter was Spider-Man. Since watching the city is such a big responsibility, Aaron lets Miles know that if he ever needs some help, or just to talk to someone, he can call him, which he'll probably take him up on one day. With his day's work of being Spider-Man done, but not really, Miles finally gets the chance to call Finn, and she wants to meet him at the Science Center because nerd, so that's his next stop. She's waiting for him on the roof because I'm guessing New York doesn't have security on these buildings, so they can pick up the time capsule that the two of them had hid years ago with Finn's brother Rick, on the same day that he had got offered his position at Roxxon as the head of their clean energy group. The only thing they had put in the box was a replica of the energy converter that they had made that had been put on display at the Science Center, and a picture of the three of them, which makes Miles ask why the three of them had lost touch in the first place, which makes Finn say that she's late, and she runs off in a typical way to avoid talking about something that she doesn't want to talk about. But since Miles has to get to his mom's campaign rally, he doesn't really push the issue. A lot of people show up to support Rio, including Aaron, who promises to leave before Miles' mom sees him, since his slightly shady past had him at odds with his brother who was a cop. Her whole campaign is based on forcing Roxxon to come clean about what's in their experimental fuel that they're pushing across the city. But Miles is just worried about her safety since the last time he was at an event like that his dad died. And as expected, things go bad when the Tinkerer hacks a billboard, calls out Simon Krieger as a killer, vows to keep Roxxon Plaza from opening, and starts to attack the Roxxon security guards. Ganke goes to get Miles' mom out of harm's way, while Miles suits up and starts punching people. Miles' mom still gets hurt, but it's minor, which is good, but the attack as a whole doesn't make sense. He thought the underground was after Newform, but there's none at that location. An explosion on the Braithwaite Bridge shows that this attack was little more than a distraction for the underground's real target, a truck carrying the Newform. The Tinkerer is there in the flesh to steal the stuff, but when she and Miles fight over it, her mask breaks, revealing that, to the surprise of absolutely no one but Miles, it's Finn. She knocks Miles into the truck filled with the Newform, and his electrical powers causes the entire thing to explode. The Tinkerer leaves with the one canister of Newform that survived, while Miles is forced to save people from the collapsing bridge. Since the underground cleared out, Roxxon security turns on Miles, and they're about to shoot him, but because new powers always kick in at the perfect time, he turns invisible and escapes without having to beat up the security guards. The explosion on the bridge is labeled as Miles' fault despite the fact that a terrorist group started the attack. It's bothering Miles that he messed up, again, but what's bothering him more is the fact that Finn is the Tinkerer, and she stole the Newform. Add to that the fact that even though he got powers, he still couldn't keep his mom from getting hurt, and it all made for a pretty bad day. He had thought that since he'd gotten powers like Spider-Man, he'd be able to be like him and keep everyone safe, mainly because he doesn't know how many people the original Spider-Man didn't save or managed to kill on accident. But Ganke points out that his problem is that he keeps trying to model himself after someone else. He's not Peter Parker. Their powers are similar, but that's about it. He has to do things his own way. So he finally takes the time to learn his new abilities, give his suit his own design, and sets out to deal with the underground in his own way. And the first thing he needs to do is figure out why Finn is going after the Newform. Her family has a repair shop in Midtown where she used to do a lot of work, so he's gonna go and see if he can find any clues there. The place is boarded up and dusty, but the lights are still on. And after knocking down a wall, Miles finds a not-so-abandoned secret room and a computer that has some video footage recorded from 6 months ago of Finn and her brother. Apparently most of Rick's team had gotten sick working on the Newform, but Krieger wouldn't stop his plans for the reactor, so they decided to break in and dump the Newform and delete all of the data. Since Rick was the one who had come up with Newform, if they wipe out Roxxon's stockpiles, they won't be able to make more without his work. Finn decided to record them just in case things went bad. That way the proof would automatically upload to the Daily Bugle and maybe Roxxon could be stopped that way. There's another video showing a banged up looking Finn frustrated over the fact that none of their footage uploaded, but she promises not to let what happened be for nothing. Obviously things went bad and her brother didn't make it out. Her video was supposed to upload from her phone, so Miles tries to track it, but for some reason he didn't think about the fact that there was likely an alarm on the place and he's attacked by members of the underground. I just want to know how many members they actually have, because by now he's crippled or murdered at least 100 of them. With more gang members likely paralyzed or brain dead, Miles uses Finn's computer to track her phone, which was in one of the Roxxon buildings. He hopes finding it will let him know exactly why she turned into the Tinkerer, but what he doesn't notice is someone's watching him as he heads off to the lab that Finn and her brother had broken into. If this attack was 6 months ago, I want to know how this phone hadn't been swept out with the trash already. But comic book stories don't always make sense. Miles sneaks into the building seemingly undetected until the Prowler, a very famous thief who Miles' dad had spent a lot of time hunting for, pops up behind him. But the man's not there to fight, since he turns out to be Miles' uncle, which really explains why his parents didn't want him around the man. Miles obviously has questions, but Aaron wants him to leave since Roxxon's way more dangerous than he thinks. Aaron did a few jobs for the company, and he knows firsthand what will happen if they get caught. It involves a lot of pain and death, but Miles won't leave until he gets what he came for, so Aaron decides to help him sneak through the place. While he's crawling through the vents, Miles sees Krieger yelling at one of the scientists who still hasn't been able to make any new form, and he doesn't think he'll be able to without the batch that the Tinkerer stole, which Krieger's not happy about since the little incident on the bridge messed with his deadline. Finn's phone is in the reactor room, all of the way at the bottom underneath the thing, which would explain why nobody had taken it out of there. Even if they saw it, they'd never be able to get to it without shutting down the entire thing. Miles gets his hand on it, and using more comic book logic, he charges it with his electrical touch, one that would have definitely blown the thing up. But he sees the video of Finn and Rick trying to override the reactor. Krieger sees them, and he seals Rick inside of the reactor to kill him. Seeing that doesn't make Miles all that happy, so he decides to shut it down in the stupidest way imaginable. He absorbs the electrical energy from it. His body can't contain all of that power, so it bursts out of him, destroying the phone that he came there for. But he does destroy the reactor, which of course alerts the security. But with his uncle fighting beside him, they escape onto a passing subway train. Aaron warns Miles that he needs to hide until Roxxon starts going after someone else, but once Miles says that Finn is the Tinkerer, he understands why the boy is so focused on this mission of his, so he gives him an idea that he should have come up with on his own. He tells him to talk to Finn and tell her that he wants to join the underground. She'll definitely let him in. Miles thinks it may be a better idea to tell her that he's Spider-Man, but Aaron says that's probably the worst idea he could have since Spider-Man has been causing her problems and she probably doesn't like him very much. Aaron had told Miles' dad who he was back when the cops were hunting for him, but since Jefferson had a problem with the Prowler, he couldn't separate him from his brother, so he cut him off from his family because of it. So Miles decides that he's probably right to not tell Finn who he is and just follow Aaron's plan for infiltrating the underground. So he calls up Finn and goes to meet with her. Miles lets her know that he found out about her brother in a little side hustle and he wants to join her. Just like Aaron said, she brings him to her group's base in the Kingpin's old tower and tells him that she got the nickname Tinkerer since she's the one who built the Underground's weapons out of programmable matter, something that the Underground had saw her working on when they had tried to rob her. They decided to make a deal. They'd help her get revenge on Krieger for what he did to her brother, and they'd get famous because for some reason, comic book criminals don't realize that anonymity is the best way to get away with crimes, not being at the top of the FBI's watch list. Whether their reasons are stupid or not, Finn needs their help to take down Roxxon. Once Miles gets inside, Finn runs off to handle some business of her own, so Miles suits up and starts hunting around for the new form. He sneaks into a room where Finn and some of her people are talking, and it turns out that Miles was a little too late because they moved the new form to another lab. It also turns out that Miles' electricity had done something to the new form, and now it's unstable in a way that makes it even more dangerous, so Finn warns her people not to touch it at all. The underground members really just want to throw the stuff out since they don't understand it, but once Finn tells them that her brother made it and Roxxon killed him behind it, they start to understand where she's coming from. Miles uses the opportunity to sneak a peek at their map to see where their other lab is. Since he's able to turn invisible, that's easy to do without getting caught. And since they think they're alone, Finn tells the people to start gathering anything that can make power, generators, car batteries, or whatever, and bring them to the theater. They all head off to get it done, and because superheroes always have to do something stupid to move things along, instead of staying invisible while he looks around, Miles thinks it's a great idea to make himself visible. Of course, someone sees him, which forces him to go all punchy on the attackers. Once they're dead, and I'm saying they're dead because if someone who can throw cars punches you in the face hard enough to lift you off of the ground, you are definitely dead. Likely decapitated, but definitely dead. Genki, who's always listening to what Miles is doing, figures out that the theater that Finn mentioned is called the Gym Theater. Since that's likely where the new form is, Miles heads over there. The place is swarming with underground members, which really makes me wonder just how big the group is since Miles has now put hundreds of them in the hospital. But with a little bit of searching around, he finds both the new form and a model of what Finn is doing with it. She's trying to find a way to make all of the new form as unstable as Miles had on the bridge. That way it'll explode. Then she plans on using it to destroy Roxxon Plaza. Since the place isn't open, it'll be empty aside from Roxxon's security, which she has no problem killing. Miles does have a problem with letting them die. Crippling them is fine, but he draws the line at death, so he goes to steal the new form, but more members of the underground show up to stop him. He deals with them, but Finn snatches the new form and runs. Miles chases after her, and with her tech she manages to keep getting away. He knows that he needs to stop her, but since she's his friend he doesn't actually want to hurt her, so he decides to tell her who he is, if he can catch her. She decides that running away isn't the easiest way to deal with the situation, so she attacks Miles, which gives him the chance to show her who he is. That was a surprise she wasn't ready for, but it does stop her from killing him. The cops interrupt them before they can talk, and she runs away before Miles can do anything else. Since that went so badly, Miles now has no clue where Finn or the new form is, so he decides to go and have a chat with his uncle, who reminds him that even though he's a superhero, he's still only 17, and he needs to not get so caught up in the mission that he doesn't give himself time to unwind. That will lead him to making mistakes. After clearing his head by listening to his uncle talk about some of the things that he and Miles' dad had done, he decides to do the only thing that he can, and that's call Finn and sit down with her face to face and chat. He'll set up a meeting with her at Trinity Church, if she'll even agree to show up. She does agree to come, but she's not exactly excited about it since her friend hadn't told her that he was Spider-Man until she had nearly killed him. He does understand why she's mad. No one likes being lied to, and he understands why she's going after Roxxon, but he can't condone bombing a building in the middle of the city. Their discussion is interrupted when the Rhino, wearing a newly upgraded suit, one that's resistant to Miles' electricity, shows up and knocks both of them unconscious. They wake up tied up in one of Krieger's bunkers, face to face with the man who ruined Finn's life. He wants to add Miles to his list of test subjects because clinging to walls and tasing people with your fingers aren't normal human attributes, so finding out how this new Spider-Man came to be could really be profitable for Krieger. Unfortunately for him, taking off Miles' mask doesn't work since he electrocutes the man when he touches it, but he's brought them to his most secure facility, so he leaves to let his security work on the two of them. He wants Finn to tell him where his new form is, and he wants them to get Miles' mask off. They start beating on him, but they underestimate just how powerful his venom blasts are, and he lets off a charge that frees him and Finn. That's only the first step. The base is huge, and the two of them have to sneak out without ending up dead. The security is super tight, but with Finn and Miles working together, they manage to avoid death for a while, even though Miles is still arguing with her about her extreme and dangerous plan to attack Roxxon. While they're sneaking around, Miles and Finn see something that Miles hadn't expected. His uncle is there. Apparently Krieger had hired him to help track down the Tinkerer, and he had tried to keep them from attacking Miles, but since Krieger's people had caught the two of them together, he had decided to change the plan. It was obvious that the new Spider-Man and the Tinkerer were close, which made Miles a useful tool that could be used to help get information out of the girl. Aaron wants Krieger to let Miles go, and he goes as far as to threaten to release all of the information he knows about Roxxon if he doesn't. From the new form making people sick to the murder of Rick Mason, but since Aaron has worked with Krieger on a lot of jobs, and he's kind of a well-known supervillain, him going public will put both of them in prison, and Krieger doubts that the Prowler will be willing to turn himself in to take Krieger down. Miles can't believe that his uncle sold him out, which he didn't, and the conversation that Miles overheard should have proved that, but Finn is really upset about the fact that she had agreed to meet Miles and ended up getting captured because he talked too much. But they can't spend more time arguing because Krieger's people have noticed that they're gone, and since there's only one exit, they know where they're headed. While they're sneaking out, they find Krieger's lab and get Finn's weapons back, and as luck would have it, the lab has records of all of the corners that Roxxon has cut to make their new form, the safety regulations they've ignored, and the details on how the new form makes people sick. It's all information that would ruin the company if it got out, and that's why so many people, including the Rhino, are guarding it. With Rhino's upgraded suit, it takes Miles and Finn working together to put him down. Once he's disabled, Miles leaves Finn to guard him while he copies the data that would end Roxxon. There's more info in there than he thought. Apparently Krieger had amped up the power of his Roxxon Plaza reactor so it could meet his deadline, which means that if Finn causes it to explode, the blast radius will be a lot bigger than she expected. It won't just destroy the building, it'll destroy all of Harlem. While Miles is getting the info, Rhino decides that it would be a good idea to taunt Finn about her brother's death and how she had just stood there and watched him die. Obviously that pushes her over the edge, and she goes to kill him. Miles tackles her out of the building because while he didn't have a problem with her killing the multiple Roxxon soldiers during the fight, he draws the line at executing a downed opponent. At that point, she's finally tired of Miles interfering, and because he hasn't accepted the fact that she's no different than any other enemy, she beats the crap out of him and leaves. He's hurt so badly that he has to call Genki to come and get him, and being the genius that Genki is, he walks Miles into his house wearing his Spider-Man suit, and of course his mom sees him. It's pretty hard to hide things now that she's seen him, so Miles tells his mom everything. She wishes he would have told her before, but she's not exactly mad. Him being Spider-Man kinda falls in line with things. Her husband was a cop who died in the line of duty, so seeing her son throwing himself at danger is uncomfortable, but it's not uncharted territory. Not to mention she's a politician who's opposing one of the most powerful companies in the world. In other words, none of her family has any self-preservation instincts. After he tells her about Finn and the bomb, she gets to work on evacuating the people while Genki does what he can to track down Finn. Ironically enough, she set up shop in the Oscorp Science Center, which Miles should have guessed since the place was important to both of them. And it's closed for renovations, so it won't have a whole lot of people moving in and out. And since the place still has the energy converter that the two of them made on display, it's likely what Finn is going to use to make the new form unstable enough to explode. Not really knowing how much time he has to stop her, Miles races toward the Science Center, only to get shot down and kidnapped by his uncle. Aaron knows things are about to get bad between the Tinkerer and Roxxon, so he thinks it's for the best if Miles stays out of it until the two of them kill each other. He knows it's not what Miles wants, but he'd rather have his nephew alive to be mad at him than end up dead by playing hero like his brother had. But Miles won't hide away and let people die just to save himself, even if that means going through his uncle. He's gotten the hang of his powers after all of the fights he's been in, and he beats his uncle so he can get back to his mission. The underground has the Science Center under heavy guard, meaning Genki was right about Finn being there, and once he gets inside he finds her and the new form. He tries to tell her that the explosion will be way bigger than she thinks, but she's done listening to him. Instead, she sends her seemingly endless numbers of underground members to fight him while she heads off to Roxxon Plaza. Miles deals with them and heads off after her, only to get a call from Genki saying that the evacuation of Harlem hasn't been going well since the underground and Roxxon have turned the place into a war zone. Things are way worse than Miles had expected, and the only thing that lets him have a chance at dealing with the problem is the fact that the two groups are fighting each other more than they're fighting him. He does manage to find his mom and Genki, but he can't help them escape because Finn activates her bomb. But he does get some unexpected help from his uncle who takes over the evacuation while Miles goes after Finn. He still tries to tell her that the bomb will destroy all of Harlem, but she won't listen to him, so he finally accepts the fact that he's gonna have to fight her, so he stops holding back. Even when the reactor starts going crazy, she still doesn't stop. Krieger, ever taking the opportunity to be a dick, taunts the two of them over the security system, letting them know that his company will be perfectly fine even if the whole city blows up, because they have this little thing that Finn forgot about called insurance. This is where the whole argument about which is better, book smarts or common sense, comes in, and I have to say that common sense wins out in this situation. When Miles finally damages Finn's suit enough for her to slow down a bit, she realizes that Miles wasn't lying about her bomb destroying the city. And since that really wasn't her intention, she stops fighting. But it's a little too late for that since the reactor's too far gone to turn off by regular means. Not to mention the fact that between their fighting and the explosions, the building collapses around them. Miles saves Finn from dying, but they're both pretty hurt from the fall. With the reactor on the verge of exploding, he doesn't have time to rest. There's only one way that he can stop it from exploding, and that's to absorb all of the energy that's flowing through it. He does it, but it's a temporary solution since he can't contain that power for long. He wants Finn to get the people away, but there's not enough time for that, so Finn decides that since it's all her fault, the least she could do is carry Miles away. So when he releases all of that energy, the only person who will die is her. She carries him as high as she can into the sky before he lets off an explosion that could literally level a city. Now let's talk about this fall for a minute. Spider-Man has super strength and durability. His reflexes are enhanced, he heals fast, and falling from that high in the air would have definitely killed him just like it would have anyone else. But because the story wouldn't work if Miles had died, he survives and swings away before the cops and the press can bother him. There's a bit of an upside to all of this too. The Prowler decided to rat out Simon Krieger, which got both of them locked up, but since he worked with the cops, he's liable to get a lighter sentence. With the day saved, Peter's finally made it back, and he's happy that Miles is finally coming to his own, which is good because it's New York City, which means there's always new threats on the horizon. Only now, Peter won't have to face them solo. This concludes the story of Spider-Man Miles Morales. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and if you really want to show your support, you can donate to the channel through the link in the description. Until next time, guys, later. In the early days of the world, the goddess of mana used the Sword of Mana to take down 8 beasts of destruction called Benevodons. She locked them away inside of 8 mana stones that saved the world, but between beating the monsters and fixing the damage that they caused, the goddess was drained, so she turned into a tree and went to sleep. But other people sought to free the Benevodons so they could use their powers to take over the world. To get the ball rolling, they started a war to destabilize the kingdoms of the world to make their mission easier. With the peace of the world ruined, mana started to fade from the world, and the mana tree that was the goddess started to wither and die. And that is where the story begins. Naval is a place run by thieves, but not the break into random people's houses or rob gas stations type. These thieves are hired to rob the criminal upper class, who make life hard for the normal people, and Hawkeye is one of those thieves. They operate out of a fortress in the desert under the command of FlameCon, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. But when Hawkeye and a small crew made it back from their most recent assignment, FlameCon all of a sudden decided to change things. His second-in-command, Isabella, announced that he had disbanded the Thieves Guild, named himself king, and declared Naval an independent nation. With the power of mana changing, the resources of Naval have been going down far too fast for comfort, so they've decided to invade the kingdom of Laurent in the north, take it over, and turn Naval into a world superpower. This bit of news is a shock to Hawkeye, but the king heads off to a meeting because his invasion plan will be getting started soon. The change in the man seems weird to Hawkeye, and he's 100% positive it all came from Isabella. The woman saved FlameCon's life, but it was odd that he made a relatively new member of the guild into his second-in-command, and it's got Hawkeye's danger sense on high alert. FlameCon's daughter Jessica doesn't think her father's acting all that weird. The wells in the oasis have been drying up, so changing the way his people operate was the only option he had. Even so, FlameCon has always hated kings, and turning himself into one and attacking other people to enrich himself will make him no different from the people the Thieves Guild fought against. Jessica doesn't see it that way, but her brother Eagle does. He's been having the same thoughts about Isabella that Hawkeye has, and he decides to confront the woman, so Hawkeye goes with him. Turns out things are more odd than either of them thought. Even though FlameCon was supposed to be in a meeting, he's asleep while Isabella is talking to a guy who's doing some very bad Dracula cosplay. When Hawkeye and Eagle barge in to confront them, the man teleports away and leaves Isabella to deal with the two intruders. She claims that she can make the two of them forget what they saw just like she's been doing to FlameCon, but she decides to take another approach. She takes over Eagle's mind and forces Hawkeye to fight his childhood friend. He wins the fight, which snaps Eagle back to normal, but Isabella kills the boy herself before waking up his father and screaming to anyone who can hear that Hawkeye murdered him. Since the man has knife wounds, it's pretty hard for Hawkeye to avoid getting arrested and scheduled for execution. To make matters worse, Isabella tells him that if he tells anyone that she was the one behind the death, the cursed necklace that she gave Jessica will kill the woman. That's pretty messed up because out of all of the people in the fortress, Jessica is positive that Hawkeye would never have done anything to Eagle. She wants him to tell her who the real killer is, but since he won't, it makes her start to doubt him too. He's left alone in his cell, but his friend Niccolo blows a hole in the wall so he can escape. He tells Niccolo about the cursed object that Jessica has, and the cat guy recognizes it as the creatively named Choker of Death. The legends say that once you put it on, you can't take it off, and it makes the person wearing it share the fate of the person who gave it to them. In other words, if Isabella dies, Jessica will too. That means that if Hawkeye wants to get revenge on the woman for what she's done, he'll have to get the necklace off of Jessica first, and the only person who might know how to do that is the Priest of Light in the Holy City Wendell, meaning that's where Hawkeye needs to go. Niccolo promises to look after Jessica while he's gone, so Hawkeye sneaks out of Navarre and starts his journey to Wendell. He hops on a ship which takes him to the town of Jod, which is as close as he can get to Wendell without going on foot, and that's where his trip stops being simple. Ferolian beastmen have taken over the town, and they won't let anyone leave. Granted, Hawkeye is good at sneaking around, but the guards are way too alert for him to make his escape. Fortunately, the beastmen have a very unique character trait. During the daytime, they look like humans, but at night they turn into animals, which makes them a lot more deadly, but less focused. So Hawkeye waits until they turn, then uses the opportunity to get out of town. While he got past one obstacle, it turns out that didn't matter all that much because there's a magical barrier blocking the only path to the Holy City. And while he's good at a lot of things, magic is not on that list, so he goes to the small town Astoria to see if anyone knows a way through the barrier. Turns out the priests of Wendell put the barrier up to keep the invading armies from reaching their city, so for the moment Hawkeye is stuck. But one guy saw an odd light floating around the town at night, and since odd things usually involve magic, When Hawkeye sees it, he decides to follow it. The light turns out to be a fairy, and just like Hawkeye, she's on the way to Wendell. The problem is she doesn't have the strength to go any further, so she asks Hawkeye to take her with him. In exchange, she'll take down the barrier. Since he needs her to do just that, he agrees, but what she neglected to tell him was that when she said she needed someone to take her to the city, she meant she wanted to ride inside of their body. You probably should give out that kind of information ahead of time, but before Hawkeye can think about evicting his new passenger, the town Astoria explodes. While he was out, the Beastmen attacked it and either captured or killed everyone who was there. There's nothing he can do for them, so Hawkeye heads back to the barrier where he finds a guy in some very ineffective looking armor. His name is Duran and he's a soldier from Valsena who's also trying to get to Wendell because apparently everyone's trying to go there. Since they're both heading in the same direction and Hawkeye actually has the means to clear the path for him, Duran decides to tag along. Since the world is a dangerous place and getting worse by the day, Hawkeye doesn't object to having an extra sword arm watching his back, so Fairy takes down the barrier and the two companions head inside to deal with whatever pops up to slow their journey down next. And that's where we're going to stop for today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, comment, share it, and subscribe. Donate to the channel if you can, and I'll see you all next time.